You're watching Reddit Aliens, the weekly compilation. No relief, no breaks. Just story after story sinking deeper into the dark. If you're listening with headphones, good. If you're alone, better. Enjoy now and subscribe.
Serious. What experience made your blood run cold? Mundane, paranormal, or just plain terrifying? What happened? When I was a teenager, my friends and I were hacky-sacking on one of my friend's streets at around 4 in the morning, tripping face, which probably made the experience worse. All the lights were off in the houses, and it was super quiet. Out of nowhere, we heard this blood-curdling scream, and the light flipped on in a room of one of the houses. I could only describe the scream as someone finding their baby had died. Incidentally, I noticed balloons on their mailbox the following day, like you might put there if you just had a baby. We called 911. The dispatcher told us the people in the home were calling 911 as well, and that they were on their way. My friend didn't know those neighbors, so he never found out what happened. It was absolutely horrifying, and it still gives me chills to think about. ETA. I don't think the lady was going into labor. It sounded like straight-up terror scream. I was in class and had been working on a project. I looked down at my phone and realized I got a text from my mom, and all it said was, "Your dad is in the hospital. I need you to stay with the kids." I called my mom, who was freaking out. Without the context, I was rational and able to calm my younger siblings down while we waited. The moment my mom called from the hospital, all she said was, "I need you to stay calm when I tell you this." Instant ice in my veins. I never felt that level of dread again in my life. It had turned out my dad had already passed from a major cardiac arrest before he even got to the hospital. Mundane. I went to my child's kindergarten to pick her up. My husband was out of town. There were about 5 children there left. Mine was nowhere to be seen. Child has already been picked up. I've been with this group for an hour, and she had already been picked up an hour ago while she was with the other teacher. We have no family in this city. My blood ran cold and had to sit down. The teacher then realized that there was something amiss and went white. Then I started to scream my child's name through the building. It turns out she wet herself while in the toilet and was ashamed to go out. So she had stayed for over an hour in the cubicle, and the teacher of the next shift had just assumed she had been picked up. Probably too late, but here goes. My grandma had a massive stroke and was in the hospital on life support. She hadn't regained consciousness since she had been found slumped in her armchair earlier that week. My mom and I were at my aunt's house when my mom got a phone call. It was my grandma. She said she was okay, and she loved us, and she wanted my mom to come to the hospital to be with her. My mom left. I was too young to go into the ICU. She called a while later to tell me that my grandma had died without ever regaining consciousness. It was not physically possible for her to have made a phone call, but the caller ID matched the hospital phone number. It still gives me chills thinking about it, because I can't think of any explanation. I worked as a nurse's assistant when I was 17. I took about a month off for winter break, and when I came back there was a new resident who had been there about since when I left. He was bedbound and only occasionally gotten up into his wheelchair. While doing rounds one night, I went into his room, and he begged me to take his socks off. "They haven't taken them off for 4 weeks, he cried. Well, he had some slight dementia, and I knew he was probably exaggerating, but the guy wants his socks off, I'll do it, you know? I took off his socks. The skin of his heels literally came off into the sock. He was sobbing in pain. I went from normal to cold and numb to the most white-hot rage I'd ever felt in my life. I stormed out and said some choice words to the charge nurse and the other aides on shift. Fun fact, I later had the same guy as a hospice patient when I quit that job and went to a much better home hospice program. His wife had pulled him out and taken him home. Coming upon a car that had run off the road. Pouring rain. I stopped to check along with several rig drivers. I had current first responders training at the time. Drivers conscious, minor injuries. Babbling, probably concussed, but otherwise okay. Passenger, not so much. She was belted. That was the sad part. Force of the impact with the tree snapped her neck and crushed her chest. I could tell she was gone, but continued with the first response routine anyways until the EMTs arrived. Made my blood run cold to be that close to death. I just had the chance to post this the other day. I ended up posting a different, much less scary encounter, but here's this one. Us kids, 13 years old, 10 years old, 8 years old, and one 6-year-old boy, were alone for the night at the hotel waiting for our parents to get home, and our hotel room got a phone call. Must be mom and dad calling to tell us they're on their way from the bar. No, it was only like 11 p.m. anyways, way earlier than their normal 3 or 4 a.m. usual. It was a strange man using a voice manipulator who told my 13-year-old oldest sister, "I'm going to rape you. You should tell your mom that." And minutes later, a 12-inch wrench was thrown at the sliding glass door. Thank God it didn't break the door, just bounced back. Definitely should have called the cops that time. I'm surprised that out of the 2 couples that were on each side of us who had also stepped outside with us kids, neither of them called the cops. Told our parents when they got home hours later, but they were drunk. I very clearly remember walking the wrench inside, feeling the weight of it, I am the 10-year-old, and shaking it in my mom's drunk, half-lidded face, saying, "They threw this at our door to break it, to get to us." My sisters and I talked about this later on in life. We don't blame ourselves, but we deeply regret not calling the cops. Our parents were more than just drunk that night. My boyfriend, actually. Having a night out with the boys, drinking at a buddy's house. One friend starts to get too drunk, saying scary things, trying to fight everyone. They're trying to calm him down and get him to sleep it off, but he somehow manages to get outside and into his car to go home, but instead floors it, runs a stop sign, slams into a parked car, causing him to spin and slam into another car. My boyfriend said he ran outside right as it happened, and when he saw how fast he went and how hard he hit, he was certain he was dead. He ran down the road absolutely terrified he would find him dead in the seat. Luckily, he was okay. His car, however, was absolutely totaled. When I was 19, I texted my boyfriend, "Want to get high and go to Texas Roadhouse?" Except I accidentally sent it to my dad, who, as far as I knew, thought I was a super straight-laced kid and would completely lose his shit if he knew I smoked weed. I prepared for the absolute worst. He responded, maybe when you're 21. Completely unexpected response. Turns out, he was a major pothead and I had no clue. We did end up smoking together a few times years later. When I crashed my car back in 2010, I was on a dirt road going about 60. Hey, fuck it, 9 feet tall, bulletproof and invincible, and I hit a pothole. The back end of the car kicked up and sent the car into a sideways drift. In that instant, it hit me that I was in some serious shit. The primal fear of what I just gotten myself into kicked, and I experienced time dilation. Everything appeared to be moving at half speed, and I could see there was absolutely nothing I could do to recover the situation. The car violently swerved back the other way and was headed directly towards a huge white pine tree with a bunch of thick dead branches hanging off it. I cranked the wheel as hard as I could to try and get one more swerve out of the car and avoid becoming shish kebab man. The car entered a small ditch right in front of this tree, and the rear wheels got hitched to the culvert. This pole vaulted the car straight up and away from the tree at a slight angle. Now, this is where time really slowed down. I was upside down, 10 feet in the air, flying into the forest at Mach Jesus. I could see the sun through the branches and little pools of light in the vegetation. I also saw where I was going to land on a massive boulder. The slow motion sensation left, and my car smashed into this boulder upside down, crushing in the entire roof, aside from the driver's side. The car rolled down the boulder and landed right side up. I'm pretty sure I blacked out for part of this, but I just remember snapping back into reality, convinced I'd been seriously injured. There was absolutely nothing wrong with me. Not even the slightest indication I'd just neoed my way around death. My best friend was driving behind me and came sprinting up to the car, also convinced I was dead. He saw me looking around and kicked the door off and started checking for injuries. He told me not to move anything until paramedics got there to assess me. I didn't really register much aside from how lucky I'd gotten. I didn't really eat or sleep much the next week either. This also happened to be one of the few times I'd ever decided to wear a seatbelt. That, no doubt, saved my life. What also got to me was if I'd had any passengers, they would have all died. The only part of the car that didn't resemble crushed aluminum foil was the driver's seat. That's what hit me hardest. My best friend who ran to check on me, that I'd known since preschool, could have easily been sitting beside me, a victim of my stupidity. Now I buckle up and drive like a granny. I might get there late, but at least I'll get there. Getting arrested. There's a sudden rush of thoughts as well as disappointment in yourself, if this is uncommon for you. What will blank think of this? I thought about letting my mom down and why I was doing what got me arrested. I used to be a little klepto. I was arrested the second and final time for stealing beef jerky and goldfish crackers. I was leaving a party drunk and wanted snacks. Also was a stupid teenager. I was 16 and I was staying the night at my mother's house. I did not have a room there, so I would sleep on the couch in the living room, which was a pain in the ass because my stepdad would stay up until like 2 or 3 watching TV. One night, I'm awoken by the shouts and screams of a man saying something unintelligible, but it sounded like, die. This terrified the shit out of me. I recognized it as my stepdad's voice, and it sounded like he had lost his fucking mind. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and sat outside my mom's room. I could hear her inside trying to quiet him, which alleviated my fears that he had hurt her. So, I stayed up all night outside their door in case anything was to happen. Thankfully, nothing did. My mom told me the next day that he had woken her up that night and asked her to pray with him. At that point, he began wildly speaking in tongues. I have a lot, but the one I always come back to is my hallucination. When I was in 4th grade, I had lice. Because of this, I had to sleep on the floor so they wouldn't get in my bed. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. and rolled over. I was staring under my bed. It was a bunk bed, and I slept on the top bunk, and decided that was too creepy. I looked up in hopes of seeing something cute, staring over the edge of my bed, but instead I saw a man. He was crouching on my bed, staring down at me with these lifeless white eyes. What I will always remember about him is his skin. It was pale gray and looked papery. It was pulled tight on his thin body. I could see every vein. It was covered in these gray spots that resembled liver spots. I rolled over and refused to look at him for the rest of the night. When I woke up, he was gone. Every time I think of this story, of his empty eyes and his paper skin, I shudder. I'm sure it was just a hallucination, but still, a part of me wonders if he was real. I had an experience during Hurricane Sandy that made my blood run cold. We'd lost power for a week and all our phones were dead. My family members decided they were going to go to a relative's house to charge up and shower, etc. This was during the time that I was rather into smoking, so I took it as an opportunity to have a nice smoke and enjoy the quiet house and read for a bit. I stayed home. So, I take my dog for a walk, do my thing, everything is cool. It's pretty windy but no rain at the moment, and it's midday, so the neighborhood is pretty empty with most people at work. As we approach the house, I notice a guy standing on the curb across the street from my house, wearing a scarf or mask covering the bottom half of his face and holding a chainsaw. Immediately, I get a little nervous because there's no one else around, and hello paranoia, but I don't think anything of it and keep walking towards the house. Just as I'm about to set foot on my property, he fires up the chainsaw and starts power walking towards me. Not quite jogging, but brisk and right at me. I freak the fuck out and hustle my poor old overweight dog into the house with my heart beating out of my chest. I barely make it, and he zips past me into the backyard. At this point, I'm freaking out because I have no phone, the house phone is dead, and none of my neighbors are home, and my family isn't supposed to come back for a few hours. I stood midway between the back and front doors of the house, armed with a kitchen knife for a good half hour, while my guardian angel dog, who clearly sensed my distress, barked at this chainsaw dude. He eventually went away. I have no idea where, since I resorted to hiding at that point. Later was informed by my hysterically laughing family that he had come to get rid of a tree that had fallen in the backyard. Why no one told me and why he basically lunged at me with an active chainsaw is a mystery to me, but yeah, definitely thought I was going to die that day. Woke up one morning to my mom calling my name. She had uncovered my bird and discovered him tangled in a mesh I foolishly put in there. His head was completely through one hole, and he was upside down with others tangled around his wings and more of his head. He wasn't moving or making noise. I immediately felt like throwing up, but I grabbed my razor and started cutting pieces tied around him. When I finally got his neck free, I saw that he was just staring at me, watching me. I breathed such a huge sigh of relief. He didn't leave my side for the next few days, and anything that looks like that mesh did, he's terrified of. Losing a loved one is awful, but losing a loved one because of something you did is something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. This happened when I was in 10th grade. We had a milkman who also used to bring his dog, which was as big as a small bear, and that dog used to enjoy sleeping under our car. So before leaving for school, I used to roll a few stones under the car, making sure none of them hit him, and shoo it away. A couple of months later, we had to shift into new apartments. Everything was moved and only my dog was left in our old apartment. It was 5 a.m., and as I'm walking with my dog towards the new apartment, I heard a growl coming from some distance away. So I turned around and saw this dog running at full speed towards me. My knees and my back just froze. There were no stones or anything I could defend myself with, and there was no way I was abandoning my dog. There was no way my dog could defend me, as that dog was twice as big as my dog, and his head was larger than my head. This whole time, me and that dog had our eyes locked with each other while my dog took a piss at the lamppost behind me. After coming within a few feet of me, that dog jumped, opened his jaws while going for my neck. In my head I thought, so this is how I die, huh? Just as I lost all hope, I saw a black flash in the corner of my eye, and the next moment, my dog tackled him, throwing him a couple of feet away. But this dog wasn't done yet. He circled behind me and jumped again, going for my back, my neck. But this time my dog got his neck. The next moment was filled with that dog's screams and my dog's growls. He somehow managed to free my dog's grip and ran away with his tail between his legs. Haven't seen that milkman or that dog ever since. 1. My mum, sis, and I were at the backyard eating breakfast at the patio thing. At the backyard, we have these wires that we used to hang clothes. On one of the wires were 12 hangers, all near each other. Suddenly a hanger at the middle of the 12 starts spinning. It spun slowly, but it was spinning. None of the other hangers spun. There was no strong wind, just the middle hanger spun. We wouldn't believe our eyes. My mum asked if we saw what she was seeing. We answered yes and bolted back inside. 2. When I was 9 or 10, I got pneumonia. My grandmother from another province of our country flew over to watch over my sister and I. My mum was taking the bar exam, which was held in our country's capital. I was admitted to the hospital, and while I was there, my gran watched over me. During the first 2 days in the hospital, I had a reoccurring nightmare of someone banging on my hospital room door trying to enter. On the third night, I had the same dream, but this time, the door burst open. A girl, imagine Sadako from The Ring, comes into the room, and I turned to see my grandma, who slept on a couch next to my bed, staring at her too. The Sadako girl leans in close to my gran, and I see her whisper to my gran. Then I wake up in a cold sweat. My gran hears my gasps and wakes up too. She asks me what was wrong, and I told her nothing, it was just a bad dream. Then she asks me if I saw the girl too. Apparently, we'd been sharing the same dream for the past 3 nights. In the morning, she has my mum release me from the hospital and bring me home. We later found out a kid in the room next to mine died 2 days after I left. Getting laid off without warning. It had been a bad week. A slacker of project manager who had been delaying this pointless project suddenly was given an ultimatum that it was due Monday. It was Wednesday. I was the only Linux admin the company had, so I had to work 5 12-hour days through the weekend, and we actually pulled it off. We had a working ecosystem of a shaky Rube Goldberg messaging CMS system that no one would ever use, using no less than 12 virtual systems to essentially run a website. We had reinvented Drupal. I still get kudos and hearty handshakes. A meeting was scheduled at 2 p.m. with the security team to go over some of the highlights, only it turned out the security was for me. Without warning, I was told my position had been eliminated. I was given a generous severance, my boss couldn't look me in the eye, and the CTO gave me an apology and a huge letter of recommendation. I was out the door less than 30 minutes after the kudos and handshakes. No warning. Everyone I had worked with for years was shocked. What? Wait, why? The company essentially shot itself in the foot in a cost-cutting move. Long story short, the new president of the board of directors had made the decision because he didn't know what a Linux admin was. He thought I was a Linux admin, and since they contracted out HVAC, he saw no need for me. He also later laid off the entire HR department and the head of PR because she explained the declining magazine sales on the internet and wanted to move in that direction. Crazy. But the timing was horrible for me. My wife had died less than a year previously, representing a 40% drop in household income, and I lost my health insurance with diabetes and a health condition. It took me 2 months to find a new job, and I nearly died off my meds which on Cobra or not are way, way out of affordable range. Serious. What is the creepiest true story you know of that sends shivers down your spine? I used to live next to a senile old woman who would knock on my door late at night crying and saying there was somebody in her roof. I'd always have to assure her that it was just possums running around and that it was fine. This went on for years until her kids finally sent her to a home and new people moved in. A week or so after this, I woke up to police cars on the street outside my house. I asked the new neighbor what happened, and he told me he got out of bed to piss and saw legs dangling out of the ceiling in the kitchen and assumed he was being robbed. The guy got away, but when cops checked inside the roof, they found chairs, cans of beans, water bottles, magazines, and some blankets. Old mate had been set up there for at least 2 years, assuming her complaints coincided with him moving in. She once told me her dementia was so bad she'd sometimes have to go grocery shopping a few times a day because she'd come home and realize she forgot to buy anything. I wonder now if it was just because he was taking all her food. A friend of mine in college moved to Alaska for a year. One night he woke up to find someone quietly climbing in through his bedroom window. He jerked upright and the guy just quietly climbed back out the window and went away. Never said a word. A man in my hometown came down to the family room where his wife was after putting his daughter to bed. His hand was cut so badly he needed stitches. He said he cut it in the kitchen. So the wife called the neighbor to come over and house babysit while she took the husband to the ER for stitches. A little while later, the wife called home and asked her to check on the daughter. The neighbor discovered the dead, bloody, stabbed daughter sort of shoved in the toilet. It turns out the dad had been sexually molesting the daughter for years, and when she became older, she learned about this type of abuse at school. At trial, or sometime down the line, it was revealed that the dad learned the daughter was going to tell someone, so he killed her. He panicked when he cut himself, trying to somehow hide the crime and flush away evidence. I don't know how you flush an entire body, so my memory must be sketchy. The poor mom couldn't afford to move, divorce, and trial, and remained in the home for years until it sold. My friend was friends with the family, and besides the very obvious creep factor of all of this, she said everyone was so haunted that she still had to live there. Worked at a women's clothing mail-order catalog call center. During training, veteran worker was talking about getting to know the frequent callers and the story of one of them. So, old lady used to call in often. She was blind, but would have someone help her pick out things. The manager of her apartment complex, I think. She would order often, and they got to know her by name. Well, eventually she stopped calling in, so they contacted the number they had for her, which was the apartment manager's number. Old lady was fine, but had to be moved to a new building because, well, the old blind lady was very meticulous with her cleaning. She cleaned everything often, at old lady level, so the manager had come in to do some maintenance for the first time in many months. Every room in her apartment, above head level, had thick webs and nests of black widow spiders, hundreds and hundreds. Can you imagine? An oblivious old lady walking around blind in a house she thinks is spotlessly clean, but there is a soul-freezing nightmare swarming all over the ceiling. Shared this before, but it's a good one. This happened to a friend of mine a few years ago when he and his wife were hiking in the Gold Coast hinterland of Queensland, Australia. After a good day's hike, they stopped at a rest stop to use the bathroom before heading back to the car. The bathrooms at the rest stop were compost toilets, so the block of toilets were positioned on top of a large tank. The waste goes in the tank and breaks down naturally, and in the winter months often shoots a blast of cool air up the bum of anyone using them. My friend's wife went to use the ladies while he waited outside, but she'd not been in there long when he heard her scream and rush out of the toilet. It's Australia, so there are many reasons for running out of a bush toilet screaming. Snakes, spiders, drop bears, Yvonne Milat, but this one takes the cake. There's a man in the toilet. My friend was confused. His wife explained to him that she'd gone to the loo, and after she'd finished, she looked into the tank. Come on, you know morbid curiosity would get the better of you too. And there, submerged in liquid poop, she saw a bald man staring up at her. He didn't believe her, but she was adamant he'd go look. So he went into the ladies, and with the flashlight from his iPhone, he illuminated the poo pool to get a better look. He couldn't see anything, but she was certain there was someone hiding in the tank watching people use the toilet. As they were leaving and still arguing about it, they were approached by a man. "Excuse me, but did you see something weird in the toilet?" My friend's wife answered yes. The man replied, "Was it a man?" He and his girlfriend had been hiking the weekend before, and his girlfriend had seen the same thing. They all ran back up the toilets for a second look. When they reached the door, they heard a sound from behind the toilet block. My friend and their new acquaintance went around the back of the toilet block to check it out while his wife looked in the tank from the bowl. At the back of the tank, the top hatch had been opened, the bolt and chain had been removed, and a telltale brown smudge seemed to suggest someone had slid down the back of the tank and taken off into the bush. True story about my grandma that takes place before they had children. My grandpa, Daryl, worked night shifts, so my grandma, Dora, was home alone most nights. Her sister-in-law, Rose, would randomly come over to keep her company. Dora decided to go to bed early one night. Rose came over that night to see how she was doing. She went to Dora's bedroom after calling for her with a reply of, "I'm in bed, just come in." Upon entering the room, Rose starts acting weird and telling her she really wants her to get up and come help her with something in the kitchen. Dora was ready to go to sleep and was already in bed and really didn't want to. Rose was really adamant for her to come help her, telling her it was urgent. After a while, Dora eventually got up and followed Rose to the kitchen. Upon entering, Rose whispers in a panic with tears in her eyes, "There's a man under your bed with a knife." Dora, of course, didn't believe at first, but seeing the panic in Rose's eyes, she could not believe her. They proceeded to call the cops and left to the neighbor's house. The cops came and found a man hiding in the closet with a butcher knife. And that is the story of how my grandmother was almost murdered and why I still to this day, as a 30-year-old man, check under the bed. My town is home to the world's biggest man-made dam. In its early stages, the workers had to relocate coffins of a cemetery that were put in the path of the dam. One worker accidentally dropped a coffin, which opened and revealed deep scratch marks on its lid. The workers decided to open the rest of the coffins and found that several others also had deep scratch marks on the lids. I was the youngest in my household, so I drew the short straw when it came to morning shower times. 5:30 a.m. was my slot, followed by my sister. I was showering one morning when I heard what I thought was my sister pounding on the door. I did what any 9-year-old would do and screamed my lungs out, telling her to stop it. The pounding continued. My dad got up to tell my sister to stop it, but my sister was fast asleep. He heard that the pounding was coming from outside, so he looked out the window. There was a man looking in the bathroom window. He did what a Midwestern dad would do. He grabbed his rifle and chased the man through the snow of a Michigan winter. He didn't catch him. I didn't know any of this had taken place, so when I got to school and heard people laughing about my dad running through the snowy streets wearing only his underwear, I got home and asked my dad what had happened, and he said there was a bad man watching me shower. He told me years later that this man had made a masturbation plinth and had clearly spent a lot of time setting it up the tree, and even more time watching me shower every morning. The cops were called and the man was never caught. The thing is, I come from a very small town where everybody knows everybody else, so chances are high that I came face to face with the masturbation plinth man and was none the wiser. This couple had a huge tree in their backyard and it started to smell and ooze. They had an arborist come in and look at the tree, but no one could figure out what was wrong. The couple decided to have the tree removed. When the branches started coming down, a body fell out. A homeless woman was sleeping in the tree and died. Her body had been decomposing for ages. My parents knew this couple. I had history with their daughter. Happened to me and a friend on US 54 in central Missouri. This happened around 1 a.m., heading on a spring break fishing trip to Arkansas with lightning illuminating the clouds in the distance. We were driving my minivan on a winding 2-lane road. No lights except my headlights when I see a person standing in the middle of the road waving us down. Optimistic me decides to pull over to see if I could be of help. Smart me kept the doors locked and only cracked the window a bit. Smart me also never put it into park. Guy walks over and his face is bloodied. Says he had just wrecked his car. There was about a 10-foot ditch along the road, so I couldn't see any car. Says his wife hurt. Wife comes crawling up. She's bloodied too. I offer to call the police for help and wait until they arrive. They want to wait in the van. I politely decline. At that point, they tried pulling the door handles to get into my van. I don't know if they were truly hurt or if this was a hillbilly ruse, but I wasn't willing to wait around to find out. I was fortunate that they didn't have a weapon of any sort. Adrenaline from the situation kept me awake until the 4 a.m. arrival in Harrison, Arkansas. My best friend was a contractor working on a contract at a military base. It was an administrative position with around 15 people. He was the only male. One day, one of his colleagues got a phone call from the hospital informing her that her 2-year-old daughter and husband are both in hospital and that she needs to get down there ASAP. She went to the hospital and was informed that her daughter had passed away. Her husband was not at the hospital anymore, but in police custody. Turns out her husband had raped their daughter. She died during the assault, and somehow he got stuck in her. He went to the hospital where they removed her and arrested him. I get shivers of anger every time I think of this. This happened to my teacher in high school. I don't have any way of verifying it's the truth, but I can't think of any reason she'd have to lie, and she seemed very shaken up when telling our class. My teacher is a woman, and she was probably in her mid-40s at the time. Her husband was out of town, so she was sleeping at home by herself on a random weeknight when she starts hearing this thud over and over again. After a couple minutes, she gets out of bed and tries to figure out what it is. It sounds like it's coming from the backyard, so she looks out one of the windows on the second floor. There's a man repeatedly flinging himself at her back door. The way she described this guy, you could just see she was extremely disturbed by him. She said it was like he had no regard for his own body. He would just take 2 to 3 steps back and slam his whole body into the door. She said she thought he had to be on some kind of drugs, but still, she lives in a quiet, pretty much crime-free neighborhood, and some dude randomly started ramming his body at her door. Anyway, she called the cops, and the lady on the line told her she should leave the house, but she thought she would be safer staying in her room and hiding. I can't even imagine how scared she must have been waiting for the police to arrive. They came after a couple of minutes and arrested the guy. She didn't get to speak to him or really find out very much other than that they put him in jail. I graduated before I found anything else out about it. My freshman year of high school, a bunch of the jocks took a group of popular underclassmen to a ghost town that we have in the southern part of our county. There, they were just going to spook the kids and have a bit of fun on Halloween. In actuality, they were probably just out there to go get trashed. However, as they were, quote, setting up the scare, the entire convoy of kids got shot at by an unknown assailant in the woods with hunting rifles. Nobody was hurt, but the bullet holes in the cars suggested they were shooting to kill. It made local and then national news over the weekend, and some kids were super traumatized about the whole deal and were allowed to stay home for a week. That area has been known for cultist gatherings and such, as the town still has an intact graveyard, but a lot of us figured it was a prank, and that they had set up the whole thing, bullets and all. Fast forward to my senior year. My dad had been working the cardiac rehab department of our city hospital for 13 plus years. He had an older man come in and do a stress test, heart rates, EKG machines, etc. This is so that he can be discharged from the hospital in stable condition. From my dad's perspective, he failed the test pretty miserably and had to stay longer. However, that night, he had a severe heart attack and died. His family was there when it happened, and they requested a sheriff's officer immediately. They explained that he was responsible for the shooting, and they could provide evidence and point out who else was involved. That week, the cops arrested 4 of 5 guys in connection to the attack and discovered they were cooking meth out in that patch of woods. They all lived nearby and thought the convoy of kids was the police conducting a sting-op. Not really creepy for me personally, but it still gives me shivers to think that a few of my friends could have easily died. This actually happened to a friend of mine. She used to live in an entirely different town when she was younger, and her closet had this strange door in the back of it. Well, whether it was imagined just due to her being a child at the time, or if it really did happen, she started to hear noises coming from behind this door whenever she went to bed. She told me that several times she tried telling her parents that she was hearing these noises, but they never believed her. So, some time goes by, and one day her parents get a call from the police because they just arrested a homeless man. This was not just any homeless man though. This homeless man was living in some sort of tunnel that goes straight to that door in the back of her closet. So every once in a while, for whatever reason, this man would come through that door and watch my friend sleep in her closet. The story of Leszek Pekalski, the vampire of Baito. Imagine a Hodor-sized mentally challenged hobo caked in old semen, blood, and fecal matter who uses freight trains to travel along Poland, getting off the train randomly whenever it stopped on a secluded train station, preferable near a park or in the woods. He would then chase down a random person of any gender, overpower them, then extremely brutally rape them, vaginally or anally, while either strangling them dead or breaking their neck with his bare hands. He was so insanely strong. Then some of the victims were found literally raped to death, internal organ rupture or broken pelvic bones rupturing an artery. He used to break victims' legs to push them out of the way, or simply broken into a human pretzel, dislocated limbs, unscrewed necks, spines broken backwards, etc. After he came, he would just hop back on the next train and reappear in some other random town. It took ages to hunt him down and put him behind bars in a prison asylum. The best part? Due to a technicality caused by some kind of colossal fuck-up during the investigation, he will be set free in 2017. He claims to have killed at least 80 people. There's evidence of at least 17 confirmed kills. TLDR. The unholy hobo redneck hellspawn of Jason Voorhees and Hodor is going to rampage again in 2017, rape-murdering random people to death. When my mom was a teenager, she would get calls from an anonymous man who would just breathe heavily into the phone and say creepy shit. One night, she was sleeping over at her best friend's house, which was directly next door to her own house. It was the middle of the night, but she decided to go home. Her friend said that she would then sleep over at my mom's house instead. So the two of them walked together to my mom's house. My mom's friend suddenly screamed, and they both ran inside. When they got inside, my mom's friend said that she saw a man hiding in the bushes between the two houses. If my mom's friend hadn't decided to go over with her, she would have been walking alone. Who knows what would have happened then? Happened to a friend. Her husband was frequently out of town and she was often home alone. One night she went around locking all windows and doors as usual and went to bed. A while later, she woke up to see a naked man standing in her bedroom doorway. She screamed. Her husband, who happened to be home that night and went to bed early, woke up and started to chase the guy. She called the cops. Hubby lost the guy at a park down the street, but saw a squatter shelter and some homeless guy came out of it. Looked like he was just putting on pants. Cops show up, arrest the guy. He admits he got in a basement window and was going to rape her. Had been watching her and knew she was usually alone. When my mom was about 20, 2 years before she met my dad and 9 years before she had me, she used to commute to and from work via the bus. Only problem was the closest bus station to her house was about a mile walk away, and she lived in the Bronx, New York, which, if any of you know, is insanely ghetto. She usually never worked late and always asked for early hours because the walk home after sundown was insanely sketchy. Every day, she would pack extra food to bring with her because she would always walk by the same homeless man and would feed him. Over time, the homeless man would be eagerly waiting for her to show up, and they forged kind of nice friendship. Well, one night, she had to work to close and ended up taking the last bus home. On her walk from the bus stop, she got pulled into an alley by two men, one of which pulled a knife on her, and both proceeded to forcefully attempt to undress her. Moments later, the homeless man she had become friends with came running around the corner with a broken bottle and began fighting the men off while yelling at my mother to run. She got away safely without being hurt. My mom never saw that homeless man again. Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't saved her? My mom probably would have died that night. I think about it from time to time, and I thank God that man had been there. All I know is that he earned a spot in heaven that day. It made me realize how fragile and rare any life is. The brink of my own existence was laid in the hands of my mother's humbleness and the selfless, courageous acts of another. People who have worked as forensic photographers, what picture you took traumatized you for a long time? My husband worked with crime scene photos, and even though I could probably handle some of the photos, I'm not allowed to look, and I do respect the people's privacy of who he has pictures of. One day, for some reason, his phone was left unlocked or not properly closed, and a picture was enlarged on the screen. Nothing crazy, just a younger kid with a blank stare wearing a backpack, and he was on the playground by the chin-up bars. Not knowing it was his work phone, I asked who the kid was, maybe a colleague's kid, a friend, etc., to see if I knew him. Turns out, it was a crime scene photo. Kid hung himself after school on the chin-up bars, which were much too short to hang on. In the next photo, I saw the bottom half of his body, which broke my heart. His legs were bent. I always pictured hanging suicides as up high, the person struggling, maybe even regretting their decision. Seeing his legs bent showed how much determination he had to die. No blood, no guts, and still the most unsettling photo I've ever seen. I worked in a forensics lab doing autopsies for a bit. An older woman who died was brought to rule out foul play. She had been dead in her home for several days, so the smell was horrific. She had several days of urine and stool in and on her clothes. Her vagina had prolapsed and there were maggots eating away at it. The prolapse had caused an ascending urinary tract infection leading to sepsis, which likely killed her. It had reached her kidneys, and when we cut into the kidney, it exploded pus everywhere, and the smell almost made me pass out. This was my first day on the job, and I very nearly did not go back. I used to work in a photo lab that developed pictures for a number of local police departments before the digital age came about. Since I was the lab manager, I was the one to develop those sensitive crime scene photos. Mind you, this was about 20 years ago, but some really stuck out. The worst? Definitely the death of a young child. He was around 2 to 3 years old. I believe it was death by strangulation, but it's not like we were told any details from the police department on pending investigations. We were just warned in advance. It was especially fucked up since the child's eyes were open and bulging. The skin was blue and even more purple around the neck and face. I can't get that shit out of my head. The craziest? A dismembered body in a Tupperware container. It was found on a rooftop, loosely covered in concrete, and the body was there for easily a decade. The head and hands were missing, just the torso, legs in pieces, and arms. What really stood out to me is that the torso resembled a dried out and cooked turkey. I ended up looking for an article years later to find out it was a mob hit. Others to note would be the usual gunshot fatalities and also fatal car crashes. I got pretty desensitized to seeing the images and just focused on color correcting, but that young kid was beyond messed up. I'm an X-ray tech. We occasionally have to take X-rays on babies who have been abused. When I was in X-ray school, my son was born. I had to take post-mortem X-rays on a baby abuse victim that was only a few months off from my son's age. It is a full-body series of X-rays, and in my 10 years of doing this, that is the one thing that really messed me up. My dad, back in the day before digital cameras, had the only photo developing lab for 50 miles in a fairly well-known outdoor destination. With no other nearby services, he would develop the photos for all deaths, accidents, etc. It was pretty common for people to fall off the cliffs and die, but those photos weren't the worst. According to him, the one that tops the list is a lost hiker who figured if he could climb up a cliff, he'd be able to see where he was. So guy starts climbing and gets surprisingly far, but eventually gets to a spot he has to chimney up. Basically 2 flat parallel walls, and you climb them with friction you get from pushing off the walls. Guy makes it almost out, but then loses it. From the blood smears on the wall, you could see how he used his hands to try to stop his fall almost the whole way down. In the pictures, the hands were worn through to the bone. Definitely not the way I'd want to go. I'm a criminal defense attorney, so I look at a lot of crime scene and autopsy photos. The only one that really sticks with me is the first set of autopsy photos I saw. I got a folder with a court transcript, filings, and documents for the case. There was an envelope clipped to the inside. I usually don't get multimedia evidence until a little later, so I figured it was a supplemental court document of some sort and popped the contents onto the desk. It was not. It was the medical examiner's photos of the victim. Lacerations all over their body, bone deep in places, with an apparently large bleed. What got burned into my mind for whatever reason was the subcutaneous fat. It wasn't all like I expected fat to look, and for some reason, that made it all the more disturbing. I was totally unprepared to see it, and I still curse whoever it was that didn't label that envelope. I didn't personally take the photo, but my cousin did. He used to be a crime scene photographer. It was of a man in his 60s. His nephew had mental problems and snapped one day. The nephew stabbed the man over 50 plus times in the face and chest area. The man was found in the woods by a road and the body had been there for almost a week, so Mother Nature took a toll on the body. A coyote had gotten to the body and a leg was missing. The photos from where the body was found and from the apartment still haunt my memory sometimes. I once curated an archive of forensic crime scene photographs for a city's police department. They told me lots of times TV show, movie production staff would use the photos for reference, especially because the photos depict what actual home interiors look like inadvertently over time. There was one set of photos from the 60s of a tidy suburban home and some poor middle-aged woman who had been raped and strangled in the middle of the day. The banal setting and the fact that depicted a real person and a real crime really haunted me. That was a difficult project, since every photo I looked at was something horrible. I worked as a 911 dispatcher for a few years and had access to crime scene photos. Sometimes when it was slow, I would look up interesting cases, homicides, suicides, etc., and read the case files and look at the photos to pass the time. One in particular still sticks with me. There was an elderly man whose friends had all passed away. It was just him and his wife, and they had just gone to the funeral of his last best friend that week. He was feeling alone and depressed. While his wife was out of the house, he decided to end it. He wanted to be considerate though and not leave a mess inside the house, so he took his gun outside and tried to shoot himself under the chin in his gravel driveway. Trouble is, he didn't have a handgun. He had a longish rifle, maybe, can't remember, and couldn't get a good angle while still reaching the trigger. He ended up fucking it up and shooting up through the palate and out his cheek near the eye. After the first shot, he was bleeding and hurt, but fully conscious, alert, and aware of his surroundings. Based on the crime scene photos, you can tell what happened next. This man changed his mind and wanted to live. He went back in the house, through the garage so he didn't track any blood, and went to the bathroom just off the garage. He stood and looked at the damage in the mirror, and based on the blood pooling, he was there for several minutes, just examining his injury and trying to decide what to do. Should he call an ambulance? Should he call his wife and tell her what he did? Could he even talk with his face like that? What kind of life would an old man like him have left with half his face blown off? Well, he must have found his answer, because the blood trailed back out to the garage and to another spot in the driveway, the spot where his wife found his dead body, with not one but 2 bullets to the head. I think a lot about those few minutes he spent in the bathroom looking at what he had done. What would that feel like? What was the thought process like? Was he emotional and distraught? Was he in shock and weirdly calm while he examined his injuries? Did he recognize himself? Did he feel pain? Did he think about what he had left to live for? I also think about the consideration. He was doing something for him, something he knew would hurt his wife and possibly traumatize her if she was the one to find the body. So he decided to do what he could to minimize the mess. That small act of love really sticks with me. I might be leaving you, but I'll make sure I only bleed on things that will be easy to clean. The driveway, the garage, the tile bathroom, just damn. When I was a sophomore in college, I took some criminal justice classes taught by an old ex-cop. He was friends with some equally old forensic photographers, and on occasion he'd show us photos and let us guess the method of death. We were nearly always wrong. The bulk of the photos were of elderly people who had died in their homes of natural causes but not been found for a while, or if they had been found, it was by the flies or their hungry pets first. We always thought they'd been beaten to death, but the one that stuck in my mind and convinced me that no way in hell I could ever be a cop was the day he showed us pics of little kids who had been killed by their parents. This one toddler, his piece of crap father, had repeatedly swung him by the heels, slamming his head into the toilet even after he died, until the toilet basin broke. The kid's crime? Not being toilet trained. That poor baby was not even 2 years old. If I'd been a cop on that case, I would have killed that SOB and then spent the rest of my life in prison. Those pics wrecked everyone in my class. It was the last time the professor showed us kid pics. That was over 20 years ago, and I still tear up to remember that damn photo. Not my picture, but an old friend. 20 plus years New York detective showed me a picture that to this day still irks me. A man with a screwdriver stuck in his eye, with the tip sticking out the back of the skull. All of his teeth were kicked into his mouth. Turns out his brother and he had argued over how much of some drug shipment they would divide up, and the living brother decided he wanted it all. I mean, you stab someone in the eye, it's one thing, but to go overboard and just start kicking his face in with your shoe, that you push all of his teeth into his throat? I fucking stared at that picture for 30 minutes and took a good day or two to stop replaying what was that guy's last few moments. He acted like it was a restaurant menu and just another Tuesday at work. I am a medical legal death investigator, a forensic investigator that only investigated unnatural and or suspicious deaths, so like the medical side of forensics. And one of our main responsibilities is responding to death scenes and taking numerous pictures to document the situation, as well as assist us with writing our reports when we get back to the office. At this point, it's not so much the content of gore that is really traumatizing, because once you've seen one blown off head from a shotgun suicide, you've seen them all. It's not that we aren't bothered by them, it's just that the actual content doesn't bother us, more the reason for why some of them do it. But I digress. One that sticks out was a call from 4-ish years ago, where some construction company was working on an overpass. They were cutting a Jersey barrier when a flagman waved a truck under the bridge. At that point, the Jersey barrier, which had not been secured properly, was cut loose and fell off the side of the overpass at the exact time the vehicle had driven underneath it. It was 10 to 15 tons of concrete. There was a young couple and their months-old child in the back. All where they were supposed to be in that vehicle, but unrecognizable. I'll let you use your imagination. Suspended hanging tends to weird me out because it's such a jarring thing to just see someone fully suspended from a roof or in a closet. Sorry for the novel, but for anyone who's been in the field for an extended period of time, you'll often get I don't know, there's been so many weird ones, but everyone usually has a few that they retell. My friend's untimely death. He was killed in a freak, small but powerful explosion. His skull was basically opened like a can opener in the process. It was the first investigative photo series I've ever shot, and will easily be the hardest. It took me weeks to stop seeing him in my memory as any other way. Now the memory is a driving force. He was our department's fire department lead investigator, and the job normally would have fallen to him. In his absence, someone had to step up, so I did. It was heavy but humbling honor to tell his final story. Husband is a cop. He has told horrific ones, but the one that fucked him up the most was a girl whose body looked like mine. Same hair color and style of dress. We were going through similar depression issues at the time, and this girl took a shotgun to her head. There wasn't a face left, and for him, because I was also very depressed at the time, and the bodies were so alike, he said all he could see was me lying there. Apparently her skull shattered so much that there was no surface without blood or bone on it, but her brain had ejected mostly intact. He had to go to therapy for a while after that one. I'm a trauma nurse, so usually when I see gore, the person is still alive, and that is a whole different ballgame. But HIPAA laws exist, so I won't be sharing. I used to study forensic science, and we had a guest speaker on the subject of making crime scene photos. She got asked what the most effed up crime scene was she took photos of. She told the class that she actually had some of the photos from the crime scene in question. But first, everyone who wanted to leave, because the photos from before were nowhere close to what she would be talking and showing. Now, to this point, she had shown pictures of stabbings, gang violence, and a person who died in a fire, so some people were smart enough to leave, but morbid curiosity is a bitch. She showed pictures of the inside of a shed with tools, a workbench with some blood on it, meat hooks, etc. She wasn't allowed to show all of the pictures, but she started to tell the story of a serial killer who killed people who went camping in the nearby wilderness. So far pretty fucked up, but nowhere that traumatizing. The guy liked to hunt and dismember his victims, in certain cases eat some of them, and take trophies of those he ate. Okay, more fucked up, but so far not the most fucked up pictures we've seen that day. The last pictures were of his trophy case, a shelf of small children bones. She had to take photos of every pair. If you've ever had a paranormal experience, what had happened? Oh boy, do I have something for this. I live in a house that is almost 300 years old. The running joke I have with friends is that there is a friendly house ghost or spirit living here with me because of typical noises from old houses and general weirdness. I joke that it's friendly because it doesn't bother me, and I don't bother it. My hallway has a motion-activated light on a timer. Sometimes the light switches on and off again for literally no reason, adding to the joke. I got used to it. I invited a girl over that I had just started dating. Being romantic, I had candles burning and one of those things where a candle heats a dish of scented oil. At some point in the evening, there was a bang, and the boiling oil just exploded, blasting all over the wall. No one got hurt, and I jokingly said, "I guess the house spirit doesn't like you." She was a bit on edge after that. While in bed, just about to go to sleep, we see that the light goes back on again in the hallway, in darkness. The light shines clearly under the bedroom door. which is of course super creepy. I tell her that stuff like this happens sometimes, but then the light stays on. I'm slightly flustered. Well, that hasn't happened before. She went semi-hysterical, like when you're watching a horror movie, so I decided to double down on it. Honestly, I'm pretty nervous myself at this point. I half-jokingly reason that the spirit wants to tell me something. We do a quick tour around the house, looking for something out of the ordinary. Maybe we're in danger. Maybe a burning candle we forgot? Nothing. I end the evening saying something like, "Dear Spirit, whatever it was that I did to upset you, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." The light stayed on for the rest of the night, and I didn't have the best sleep. In the morning I get out of bed. The light is still on. I wave at the motion sensor. The light goes out. The light stays out. I go to the living room, and literally the first thing I see is a still burning candle, but the flame was sunk so deeply we had totally overlooked it when we blew out the candles in the evening. I had caught it just in time, as it was already at the bottom, about to touch a wooden piece of furniture. I'm a very reasonable man, and not really a believer, but I've been in doubt ever since that night. My dad has had loads of strange things happen to him over the years. One day he said he had a strong feeling that his mom was about to die. She wasn't ill, so he walked to her work and saw a crowd outside, and sure enough it was her. She had had a brain aneurysm. Another one he had was he got up to go to work nice and early. He would run to work through a park, so he goes in the park and comes out fine. He gets into work and they ask him why he's a few hours late, which he's confused about because he left early. He checked all his clocks back home and all were correct, same as his watch. So at some point on his run to work, he lost about 2 hours and he has no idea what happened. Not sure if paranormal or not, but I always think back to this and it scares the crap out of me. I think I was 17 at the time. Some friends and I decided it would be fun to go to a lake super late at night. We get there and our ride ditches us, so we're stuck with walking back into town. So walking down rural Texas roads late at night, we come across a house on the right on a hill, and I see a ghostly figure going back and forth fairly fast. I'm pretty freaked out at this point, but we continue down the road. We get close and see that it's a girl in a white gown. Can't get more cliche as that, riding a bike in a circle pretty quickly, at consistent speed which looked fake, as if they were on a track or being pushed. We get close enough, and they break off from the circle and go directly into a small dark shed on the side of the house, at the exact same speed. It was a small shed. Did they hit the wall? Did it continue into the house? Did they have really good brakes? Was it a ghost? I don't know. But we continue and find a house and decide to see if someone could give us a ride. I don't know who's more stupid, us knocking on a random house in the middle of nowhere, or the guy that answered. But the guy was about to head to work. He told us that the family that lived in that house is part of a cult, and that the kids never leave the house, and that they have seen some spooky stuff. Really neat guy though. Played us his mixtape of some R&B music he made with his wife. I was never scared of the dark until that night. I'm probably 17, asleep in my room with shutters closed. For whatever reason, I wake up. My eyes go straight for the windows, the only source of light in the bedroom. Then I see it. A sort of dark figure right before my windows. The chilling part is not about its face, but about its hand. I could see the lights of the outside sculpting its fingers clearly. I reach for the switch behind me and, of course, it's gone. I'm pretty sure it wasn't real, like my brain was still asleep at that moment and nothing was indeed in my room, but I couldn't help it and slept with the light on from this night on. Once I was at a friend's father's house. We were all sitting around the lounge room talking, and my friend's 2-year-old son was on the floor playing with toys when he suddenly just stopped what he was doing and pointed up to the light and said, "Fix that." And poof, the light blew out completely. I'm not sure about paranormal, but there was no flickering or buzzing emanating from the light that any of us were aware of, so to this day nobody can explain exactly how that happened. Near me is a man-made lake that was built over a town. People say that when they made the lake, they didn't dig up the bodies from the local cemetery, causing the lake and the surrounding to be haunted. I know those are fake, but I've had some weird instances near the lake. This one stands out the most. I went fishing with my dad around 4 p.m. We tried a new spot, which entailed us walking about half a mile through this big field that had grass about 3 or 4 feet tall, then through a short tree line. Fishing wasn't great, and we started packing up at about 7:30. On the way out, we got a little turned around, and by the time we got to the field, it seemed to be unusually dark for the time. This was midsummer, so sun's out till 9:15 or so. We had no lights, and weren't prepared for the dark. We had to find our way back through this sea of tall grass in the dark. As we are about halfway through the grass, we start to hear what sounds like whispers all around, and the grass moving, like something's running in it. So we start running in the direction of the truck, with what feels like something right behind us. We clear the field, and the moving grass and whispers just vanish. Now, maybe it was all just the wind, but in the moment it was very real, and we had both experienced the exact same thing. Now, I don't go to the lake close to sunset. TLDR was fishing at the haunted lake. It got dark faster than normal and had to run through a 4-foot tall grass field with what sounded like whispers and something running in the grass chasing us. Not me, but my mother. My mom tells it way better than me, but I'll give it a shot. The day of her father's funeral, 2 weird things happened. My grandpa's boss, manager, store clerk, I don't know, something like that, was a huge dick. Just didn't treat him well and was kind of a pain in the ass. At his funeral, he was the only person who had any issue opening the doors of the church. As in, they just wouldn't open for him, which I was apparently really funny. I wasn't born yet. The second thing is that as they were going to bed, both my grandma and my mom heard footsteps, which sounded like my grandpa's, as his were very distinct due to the issues he had with his legs. It was more shuffle than anything, walking down the hall. Then, my grandma said she felt the opposite side of the bed sink in, as if he had gotten into it. I don't know if it was just a matter of routine, but it was weird that they both heard it. I have a few stories. One is mine, one is my sister's, and one is my mother's. Mine. I was watching TV while home alone when I was in 8th or 9th grade. I was sitting on the couch eating my pizza, and there was someone leaning on the back of the couch. I went to look, and a face looked at me, smiled, and disappeared in what I would describe as a minor smoke wisp. I checked the couch, and there were no burn marks anywhere on it or on the carpet. The smoke alarms didn't go off either. When I told my parents, my mom told me her story. Mom. She woke up in the middle of the night. My dad was on his side, facing away from her. Some figure was standing at the side of the bed, smiling. He saw my mom wake up, and he sat down on the bed near my dad, put his hand on my dad's shoulder, and then told my mom to look after my son, and disappeared. Then my dad wakes up asking my mom what she wanted. He thought she said something and asked why her hand was on his shoulder. Sister. She saw what turned out to be our grandfather, who was killed in a single vehicle accident in 1977, walking around the upstairs of our house, peeking into the 2 bedrooms. I've always been told that my brother and I are almost a spitting image of my dad's dad. I worked at a YMCA camp that was built on an indigenous burial ground. I worked as a kitchen manager for one of the 2 lodges, so I had to be up at 5 a.m. preparing everything before the rest of my staff would come in at 7 a.m. to get breakfast ready for the campers. Nearly every morning, the faucets would turn on randomly at full power, and these sinks were a manual twist handle, not a sensor. Like, I'd be preparing trays of shredded hash browns, and the sink behind me would just turn on full blast. I'll turn it off, and a couple of minutes later, the one by the dishwashers would do the same. I asked the director about it because it obviously freaked me the fuck out, and that's when I was told about the whole built on a burial ground thing. I saw a UFO when I was in 4th grade, and when I was in college, I saw something I don't quite understand. The UFO. I was coming home from a friend's house. They lived like 3 or 4 houses down from us and behind us. It was a summer afternoon and school was out, no clouds in the sky, and the sun was setting, so everything had an orange-red tint. About halfway home, I noticed something dark in the sky just slowly creeping along but not making any sounds, with a bunch of lights on its sides flashing in sequence. It stopped for a few seconds and then darted off in a blur. I couldn't find it anywhere else in the sky. The question marks. I was hanging out outside with a friend after class. We were in my yard. It was late at night, 11 p.m. or so. About 100 feet from my house was a streetlight with the old orange-amber colored lights. We were hanging out and talking when I saw a figure of pure darkness, like a 3D shadow, walk across the area lit by the lamp coming toward us. I froze and asked my friend if he saw it. He did not. It walked into a darker part of the yard and then just dissolved into nothing. Moments later, coming from the area opposite of where the shadow thing appeared, a similar being appeared, but it was like it was made of some kind of glowing white energy that didn't give off any light. It's weird to describe, but like looking right at the figure, it was blinding, but glancing around and keeping it in peripheral vision, you could see it. It hovered slightly over the ground, and walked into the area lit up by the streetlight before fading into nothing. Not paranormal, but I can understand how it can freak people out. A hot Saturday in summer. After a morning working outside, I need a break from the sun. My wife is in the living room and I'm on top of our bed for a quick siesta. The room is brightly lit, but I can sleep anywhere. I doze off and wake up to feel something padding around on the bed at my feet. I think it's one of our cats that had pushed the bedroom door open and got in. I silently curse it for disturbing my nap. The light padding gets heavier. Now it feels like a full-grown man is standing at the foot of my bed, leaning on either side of my legs with his hands. I can feel the distortion of the mattress. The man crawls up the bed, straddling my body. I don't feel him touch me, but the bed is moving and my body rocks with it. When he gets to my face, the air in front of me goes cold, brutally cold. This all happens in a couple of seconds. I finally manage to open my eyes, but I can't move. I try to speak, but my vocal cords are paralyzed. That was the worst part. I finally snap out of it. Sleep paralysis sucks. My sister had this as a kid, took it as a religious sign. I think I was around 8 or 9 when it happened. My mom owned a restaurant that my sisters and I had to go to after school so that we weren't home alone. Well, on one of these nights, some drama happened and my sister drove us all home earlier than usual. When we arrived in our driveway, we saw that all the lights were on and there were silhouettes of people walking around upstairs. It looked like a party. We didn't think much of it because we did have a roommate and he was in a band and sometimes he brings his friends home. We walk into the house and nobody was home, not a single person, but all 3 of us saw the silhouettes from outside of the house. I live in a house that is on one of the most known battlefields in my state. We have this one room where when we first moved in this house, my sister heard men talking in the basement and the door slam, but no one was down there and no one else heard it, and I was in my room right across from hers. Another one is me, my mom, and my sister have heard a woman whisper our names and tell us to wake up while feeling someone scratch the bed from under us, scratch our backs, and we always hear loud bangs from our walls, but the walls are very thin, and sometimes we hear like trumpets playing very loudly, and this last thing that creeps me out is my neighbor grew up in this house, and her aunt died in this house, and she died right next door. One night I was woken up at around 1 a.m. by a ghostly white hand opening the door to my bedroom. The hand was quite high off the ground, which was odd because my husband wasn't home and the only other person in the house was my 2-year-old son. I called out to my son, but there was no answer. I got out of bed and left my room, only to see that there was no one in the hallway. I switched on the hallway light and noticed smoke coming from my son's room at the other end of the hallway. I rushed over to his room and saw that he was fast asleep, still neatly tucked in under his blankets. His bed lamp was on as usual, as his bedroom window curtain had somehow ended up inside the bed lamp, which was open at the top, and the curtain had begun to smolder, which was responsible for the smoke. It looked like it was about to catch fire at any moment. I removed the curtain from the bed lamp and potentially saved our home from burning down and my son from getting killed. I still don't know whose hand that was that opened my bedroom door. I'd like to think that it was a guardian angel, but I spoke with some people at our church and they warned me that there are no guardian angels and it was most likely an evil presence trying to win my favor. The church formed a prayer group to pray for our home to banish whatever malevolent presence was inside of it, and since then, we've never had any other supernatural incidents. Agnostic friend of mine warned me that his house, which was dated back to the 1800s, was haunted with more than one entity. He and a couple mutual friends recall weird shit happening at odd times. On one occasion, he was standing in the upstairs common room, looked down the hallway where the bedrooms all branched off, and saw a man with a lion's head and an 1800s-style tailcoat walk out of his room and go across the hall. He went down to check, but both rooms were empty when he got down there. He actually went and researched previous owners of the house and discovered that one of the first owners had died in a lion attack. On another occasion, he and his parents were relaxing in the downstairs family room when they heard a sudden crash on their mantle. My friend's parents are both Christians, and the crash that had occurred was the sound of 2 mounted crucifixes simultaneously slamming face down onto the mantle. They were all momentarily terrified, but thought it better than to give it attention, and promptly went on with their day. When I had gone for my first visit to his place, I made the mistake of staying too late, and he offered to let me stay the night, but I didn't have necessities on me, so I went home around 1 a.m. Now, with old his house is, the layout is quite wonky. There was no front door, so access from the driveway was either through the garage or cutting in through the back. I was forced to cut through the backyard with a wicked-looking gnarled tree that had been on the house's property since its construction in the 1800s. I made the mistake of looking up at the tree, and from that moment, I kept receiving the constant sensation of goosebumps going up and down my spine, alongside the nerve-wracking feeling of something watching me from atop the tree's branches. I looked back at my friend and asked if I could please go out to the garage because it's there and watching me from the tree, and he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't because everyone's about to fall asleep and the garage is loud as fuck. Just run for it." I ran for it. I cut through the backyard and got into my car. The feeling of being watched never left and instead came from my back seat. It had followed me into the car. I kept K-Love radio running in my car and constantly kept an eye on the cross mounted on my rearview mirror. When I got home, I rushed inside and got ready for bed, but the eerie sensation of being watched never left, and instead came from a corner of my room. That night was the worst sleep I had ever gotten in my life. When I woke up, nothing had changed. I still felt goosebumps running along my spine and constantly felt watched by something I couldn't see. It persisted throughout breakfast, my morning shower, and my morning commute to university for classes. When I got to campus, it still persisted up until I started being around more people, in which the sensation of being watched disappeared in its entirety. When I finally saw the same group of friends that I had hung out with the night before, I sped walked up to them. My friend asked me if I was okay, and I shook my head no, and I told him it followed me home. He could only apologize and sympathize.
What was your scariest, a second later and I would have died moment? Outside my college dorm my freshman year, there was this stoop that was half under the building, half out from under it. The building was 18 stories tall. So I'm sitting out there, sitting on the steps, not under the building, and I get up for no real reason and walk under the building. As soon as I get under the building, a huge sheet of glass falls right where I was sitting. Some idiots were messing around on the 11th floor and knocked a 10x9 window pane out of its mooring. I was walking into a Miller's Outpost, tells you the time period, and the M from the sign above the store fell down and hit me on the shoulder. It was a big glass sign. One moment sooner and it hits my head. Because it drew blood, the store offered to give me any item I wanted so I wouldn't sue. I chose an awful red cardigan. I was 16 and dumb. My friend and I were taking an elevator down to the cafeteria in our dorm in college. For some reason, we were arguing about something when the doors opened, so we hung back for a second. Then the elevator dropped 2 floors with the doors open. I still hate getting in or out of elevators, and I do a weird running start every time. I passed out at work and came around in the hospital. They diagnosed a bleed on the brain and eventually decided to drill a hole in my skull to drain the fluid. Just as they were about to put me under, the phone rang. It was the head of neurology. I actually had a burst aneurysm. According to my doctor, I would have probably been dead seconds after they started the surgery. I cannot confirm whether this would have been death, however, it would have changed my and my parents' life like death. I was about 6 or 7, and I went along with my mom to go train the new puppy we had. The training ground was quite far away from home, and I remember that it was a big field surrounded by a forest and a motorway on the side of it. I was told to stay in the car and play on my Game Boy, back when they were a thing, lol. After an hour or so, I got bored and went to have a look at where my mom was with our puppy. The car park was a little while from the training ground, but I decided to walk toward her anyway. In the meantime, an older man, 30-ish, starts talking to me, and the naive little boy I was talked back, regardless of all the times my mom told me to not talk to strangers. He convinced me I was going the wrong way and told me he would take me to my mom and the puppy was. We ended up by the motorway side, and we were about to walk down the bank to the side of the motorway where his car was parked. As I'm about to disappear down the bank, I hear the loudest scream of my name from my mom. I look back and feel the grip of the man tighten on my hand, but I was just in time to get my hand out of his grip and run towards my mother. My mom runs past me to see where this guy is, but he just got into his car and drove off. To this day, I still imagine about the what-if scenario and how close I was to being kidnapped and potentially killed. When I was in junior high, I was carpooling with another kid and her mom. For a reason I can't fathom, She decided to race a transit train, hoping to get across the tracks before the train stopped traffic. She gunned the car. I was in the back seat, screaming, "No!" She hit the train. Because I was in the back seat, I was injured the least. I had a pointy piece of metal pierce through my jeans and flesh until it hit bone. Had she been a second faster, the train would have hit us broadside and killed us all. My story is a second earlier, and I would have died. Basically, I got T-boned by a van while riding my bicycle, missed me by a couple inches, destroyed the back of the bike, and threw me into traffic. When I was in middle school, I called my mom on my cell during lunch because my head hurt so badly I couldn't move. She was 1 on speed dial. Well, the nurse came and brought me to the office for a checkup and some pain pills while I waited for my mom. We didn't live close. Nurse said no fever and to take me home and put me to bed. My mom watched me get into the truck and decided that maybe we should go to the hospital just to be safe. By the time we reached the hospital, it was further than our home. My temperature was 104 and I was incapacitated. I had meningitis. If we went home and she put me to bed like the nurse suggested, I never would have woken up. A couple of months ago, I was in a head-on collision with some dude on crack driving down the wrong side of the road with his headlights out. I was going probably around 50 before I saw him. Speed limit was 55, so that's my best guess. Saw him with a second or two of reaction time, managed to brake hard and swerve over, only bad enough to total my car. But I still walked away with nothing more than a sore neck. If I hadn't seen the dude, I don't doubt that I could have died or been seriously injured. About 30 years ago, my family and I were driving up to Jasper, Alberta in the winter. There was a slow car in front of us and an impatient one behind us who kept trying to pass. Eventually, the car behind us did pass on a blind corner and hit a logging truck head-on. The slow car in front of us was also hit, but my dad managed to put us in the shoulder and not in the collision. This was way before mobile phones or anything like that, so I remember my dad and my older brother getting out and going over to the other cars and talking with the truck driver. It was this indescribable moment of total silence and freezing cold and disbelief until the authorities came quite a bit later. I remember sitting in the back seat with my younger brothers wondering what the hell just happened. My wife was having a rough pregnancy. Tons of awful symptoms: swelling, tiredness, nausea, low blood pressure, high blood pressure, back pain. That morning glow never came. Last week, the back pain was particularly bad, cripplingly bad. She couldn't get up for work, and she had what she described as air pressure in her stomach. Despite having a presentation she needed to host, she took the day off and we went to the OB. Saw the OB briefly, and she told us to go to the ER to make sure everything was okay, as it vaguely sounded like a pulmonary embolism. My wife couldn't take in a full breath, and something was off, but we didn't know what. Cue the long wait at the ER, wanting to go home, and her thinking she could deal with the pain. We were hungry and tired. 10 hours later, ER cleared her. No pulmonary embolism in the lungs found, but there were elevated liver enzymes found in her blood test, so off we went to labor and delivery for final blood pressure check before being released. They have to clear her also since she's pregnant. Cue the doctor working in L&D coming to ask her about symptoms and the liver enzymes to clarify, and then taking over for the nurse and personally checking her blood pressure. Earlier in the ER, it was 130 over something. High for pregnancy, but not immediately concerning. But now it was 168. We aren't going home. She's not even getting up to the elevator. She gets wheeled upstairs and the OB gets called. The next bit happened quick. We were being asked a lot of questions about when the symptoms started, how far along she is. There's a sudden swarm of nurses around her, and there's a huge sense of urgency in the room. Blood pressure is now 186 over 93. She's being hooked up to the monitors, an IV to get platelets, and getting more blood drawn. She was about to get up to use the bathroom, and our doctor sternly tells a nurse helping that she cannot be up right now. Our OB enters the room and breaks the news. My wife has severe preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome. She's giving birth right now. It's not safe for her or our baby. It's early, but there's no alternative. She's getting a steroid to help accelerate the development of our baby's lungs, and once the platelets are done being administered, we're going to the operating room. She had an emergency C-section, and we were parents at 29 weeks. If that L&D doctor had not noticed her symptoms before she was cleared for release minutes later, she would have had a seizure, suffered organ failure, and died that same night. The last week has been surreal. We knew parenthood was coming, but not like this or so soon. Our baby is stable in the NICU and my wife is recovering. TL, DR. Pregnant wife felt weird stomach pressure, got cleared from the ER and went to L&D. Suddenly, emergency C-section. Going home would have been fatal. I'm a dad now. If you're pregnant and suddenly feel a weird pressure in your upper abdomen, don't ignore it. Please get it checked out because it could save both your lives. I was a freshman in college and came back to my hometown for fall break. I decided to go to a football game to hang out with some old friends. On the way home, I stopped at a red light, and when it turned green, I pulled forward as usual. From the left, a truck suddenly hit me. He was speeding and ran the red light, T-boned me right in front of my driver's door. I luckily got out with just an injured knee, a fractured clavicle, and some bruising. It haunted me for a while that, had I pulled forward just a little faster, or he had been just a quarter second slower, he would have gone straight into my driver's door, and I likely wouldn't have made it. He wasn't even drunk or under the influence. It was just a 16-year-old kid not paying attention. Had a bad hangover and was kind of nervous, jittery, which in turn made me extra watchful. I was driving home, light turned green, and I started to go. Car going about 45 in crowded city traffic gives no fucks and goes right through the red. I slammed on the brakes and felt my anti-lock brakes engage for the first time in I don't know how long. Guy missed me by inches, didn't even slow down. Had I not been hungover, I doubt I would have been given the cross traffic that second look to see him barreling toward me. He likely would have T-boned me right in the driver's door. Not necessarily a second later, more like a few seconds earlier, but whatever. I worked at a private gun range for almost a decade and had one encounter where I could have nearly gotten killed. I was in what we called a trap house, a little bunker that holds a machine that throws clay targets for people to shoot. When we go into said bunker, we put a giant traffic cone on top of it that basically tells people, there's someone in there, keep your shotguns at your side unloaded and wait for them to exit. One day, I was fixing some issues with the machine and was about to exit. I realized I left my bowl on the back shelf and stepped back and grabbed it. The second I did, I hear a shell go off and the cone on top of the house gets obliterated and falls in front of me. Turns out, one of our members had his daughter there and was teaching her how to trap shoot. He didn't realize she loaded a shell when he was teaching her how to aim. Irrelevant, because his gun shouldn't have been pointed downrange. He lost his membership over that incident. TL, DR. If I didn't forget my bowl on a shelf, I would have stepped out of a bunker and had my head blown off by a shotgun wielded by an 8-year-old girl. Earlier this week, I saw a young man almost get killed by a tram. He wasn't listening to music or anything, but it was early in the AM and he barely caught it out of the corner of his eye. The first thing he did was a textbook Wilhelm scream, and then he noticed me looking and said, "Well, I'm fucking awake now." It passed probably 2 centimeters in front of his nose. My dad and I were driving down the road after heavy rainfall in Vermont. He's driving, and I am fiddling with the radio. I hear a very loud crack, and before I can ask my dad what it was, out of the corner of my eye, I see movement. An entire tree was falling on the road due to the heavy rainfall. The dirt was too wet to keep some trees in place. My dad stood on his brake, cartoon style, and we slid nearly right into the tree. I heard a pop before we fully stopped, and when we lurched back to 0 miles per hour, we were both breathing hard. My dad got out to check the damage, and the pop I hear was a branch hitting a headlight out. First time I've ever seen my dad call 911. It was scary. Could have been the end of us if he didn't stop to chat to the waitress after we left the restaurant to go home. When I was 5 or 6, we were on holiday in Australia. My mother took me to a beach that is known because it's safe thanks to a net system that doesn't let sharks in. Well, when we arrived, the beach was empty, which was kind of strange, but we continued to have a beach day and we had a bath. My mother even swam from one point to another. After that, we were going to the car and some authorities saw us. They told us to not enter the beach because a family of alligators had entered in the water and it was really dangerous. I used to work on a farm for a doctor that had antelopes on the property, and one of my jobs was to feed them. My 3rd day on the job was my first time actually doing it since my coworkers did it before. I went out there with the feed and started to pour it out so they could eat. My supervisor shouts from the other side of the fence not to turn my back to the male antelope, and I couldn't hear him, So the first thing I did was turn my back on the male antelope to ask my supervisor what he said. Almost immediately, I had realized what I had done and turned back around to see the antelope about to skewer me. I jumped out of the way and he ripped the shirt off my back. I was like 6 or 7 when my dad and I were driving to his parents' summer cabin. Suddenly, a huge fucking moose runs from the forest from our right and across the road. I mean, there's no small moose, let's get that straight. But this fucker was out of this world huge, and we avoided hitting it by literally just a second. It was so close that I'm sure we would have hit if either me or the moose gained a second somewhere. We would have been dead for sure. Hitting a moose with a car is almost surely a death sentence anyway, but that thing was just so extra large that there would have been no chance. I did some volunteering abroad in a place that had a shit ton of feral street dogs. Usually they minded their own business and were easily scared away. I tended to carry a piece of rebar in my backpack for this purpose, but occasionally they would gang up and maul people, generally kids and old people. One night, I got woken up by the sound of a bunch of them barking and howling. I wouldn't have minded, except I also heard the sound of a woman screaming. I ran out into the street to check it out, turned a corner, and saw the biggest fucking pack of them I'd ever seen, like 30 dogs, all circling around this lady. I started yelling and throwing rocks, thinking they'd scatter, which is when the whole pack immediately turned their attention towards me. They were coming at me with their teeth bared and their ears back, and I remember being really intensely aware of the thought, okay, I'm going to fucking die right now. It was at that moment that a dude in a rickshaw came tearing down the road, flashing his lights and honking. This made the dogs bolt. Driver saved my life, or at least prevented a wicked bad mauling. It was a really great affirmation about how most people will do what they can to help you when you need it. Hunters, what's the creepiest thing you've seen or encountered in the woods? Was out deer hunting one morning and got out to my stand and situated before the sun came up. Was sitting there by myself in the pitch black and could hear the sounds of someone breathing behind me. Kept staring at the ground behind me trying to make anything out, but nothing moved. Sun came up and there was nothing around, but every so often I would still hear the sounds of breathing coming from behind me, and it was really unnerving me. Finally had enough and stood up to climb down from my stand, and on the next branch up above my head was a sleeping porcupine. So, long story as short as I can make it, I was waiting at a fallen tree for my father-in-law. I'd been there a good 20 minutes or so just hanging out. I looked behind me, and on a wash where two mountains meet, there was an old guy sitting in the middle wearing an old-looking vest and a blue cap, which is illegal today. He was just sitting there staring at me. I was confused how I'd been there this whole time and didn't see him. I put my hand up to say sorry and grabbed my gun and pack and went to start walking away, and he was gone. There's no way in hell he could have disappeared up or down. Freaked me the hell out. Didn't know what to do. I like to think I'm pretty level-headed, but still to this day can't explain it. One time, when my brother and I were hunting, we found a mattress folded in half held together by some straps. The stench was so bad, thinking it was a dead body, we went ahead and called the cops. The cops came, opened the mattress, and it turned out it was a dog. It was shot in the head. I still think about it every so often. This is my dad's story, but I think it's pretty terrifying. My dad has been a hunter since before I was born and spent most of his hunting days in northern BC, near the Yukon border. This area is mountains and tundra, very little dense brush, so you can see for miles. You'd know if there was a grizzly in the area because you'd see it long before it reached you. I only mention this because this was the environment he was accustomed for hunting. However, 2 years ago, he and my uncle drew tags for moose hunting in the Prince George, BC area, and this terrain is dense, thick evergreen forest with so much brush you can't see the ground. This is a lot like the terrain where we live, but not the typical environment where he has hunted in the past. As they were hunting one day, they split up to look for the moose that they had seen hanging out in the area, and my dad was slogging along through the thick brush. The dense foliage opened up onto a game trail, and as soon as he stepped onto the trail, he sees a mama grizzly with her cub about 50 feet down the trail. She's already up on her hind legs, catching a whiff of his smell in the breeze. He described the next moment as this. With one swift movement, she dropped down and was already barreling towards him in a full sprint before her front paws had even hit the ground. She came at him so quick
that even with his rifle over his shoulder, there was no way he could have reacted fast enough with how fast she moved. He looked up and said a quick prayer, and thankfully it worked, because she stopped just short of him. She thrashed her head, roared, and bared her teeth, and just as fast as she threw the bluff charge at him, she turns back and ushered her baby off into the woods. With all the years he spent in the woods, this wasn't his first encounter with a grizzly, but it was the first time he felt sure that his life was about to end. He was really shaken, but went back to the spot with my uncle the next day just to get some closure and make a little sense of what happened after the shock had worn off a little. Thank God it was a bluff charge, and she didn't end him. I'm happy to have my dad around. TLDR. Grizzly bear bluff charged my dad, and he's alive to tell the tale. I once saw a bear running toward my tree stand, and then it just disappeared. I stood in my stand with my bow in hand for probably 6 more hours until I thought I was good. Still think about that night all the time. I've posted this before. This was in Australia. I was on a property we had been hunting on for at least 15 years, so I knew it really well. About 10:30 a.m., I was heading to an area we had seen signs of feral pigs the day before. I had a .223 rifle with me. It was a nice sunny day with a light breeze. I was walking up a small hill that had eucalyptus trees scattered on it and light scrub. The top of the hill had some granite boulders and rocks on it. I was about 50 meters from the top when I look up and see a large, hairy, humanoid face looking down at me. I froze, and without breaking eye contact, slowly started to unsling my rifle. Not that I was going to shoot it, but if I actually having an encounter with a Yowie, Australia's Bigfoot, I wanted to be able to get off a warning shot if things went bad. Then the breeze caused the shadows from the trees to shift, and the face did one of those candlestick, two faces optical illusion things, and I realized it was a big eastern gray kangaroo. The lighting angle I was viewing it from and the roo being behind the rocks, concealing it from about mid-chest down, had made my brain make a face. Not a hunter, but my uncle owns a cabin up north that we go to every summer. It's in a small community of about 50 privately owned cabins in the middle of the woods, about 5 miles away from any named road. You have to drive down an unmarked dirt road to find it, and the only people that could find it are those that own property there. It's very peaceful and remote enough you only get one cell reception if you stand in a certain spot in the road. One night, we were outside playing a game of Monopoly when we heard the sound of a woman screaming bloody murder in the woods, maybe a half a mile away from us. It immediately silenced all of us as we heard this blood-curdling screaming for 10 seconds, then a gunshot, then silence. We were all terrified, and we were all convinced we heard a murder. The next week, we were watching the news like hawks, trying to see if any missing person stories came out, but there was nothing. We've all agreed that it was probably an animal, but I'm still not convinced. Every time that I post about this story, someone says it was probably an animal. They sound like a person screaming when they roar, and the examples they list never sound like it. The screaming will forever be etched into my brain. I will try to keep this story as short as possible. I had a friend whose dad, back maybe in the 1980s, was hunting in West Virginia with a group of friends and one of the friends' dad. They were way off the beaten path, way back in the mountains. Imagine how isolated it would be 40 years ago when you think about how isolated West Virginia is now, even with the technology that we have. They'd hunted all day and spread out throughout the woods to try to kill game. As the sun was setting, my friend's dad heard a gunshot from the valley below. He immediately ran down the hill and came upon a scene of tragedy. There, lying against the tree, was his friend's body. He was dead. As my friend's dad stood there in shock, the dead friend's dad and the other hunters approached and quickly saw the scene. Suddenly, a grizzled old man came from out of the woods and looked up with crazy eyes and only said in a strange voice, "I'm sorry, sir, just killed your son in an accident." Before they could react, the man was gone and was never to be seen again. Years later, my friend's dad was back hunting in that same piece of land and noticed that the father had put up one of those glowing crosses on the trees above where his son had been shot. You see them sometimes in cemeteries, but basically it's a cross that glows in the dark. They are very eerie, and imagine seeing one of those in the distance in the woods while you're out alone with no one else around you. Again, the sun was setting, and my friend's dad shot at a buck on top of the ridge.
The buck ran and then rolled down the hill wounded and frantic. My friend's dad followed it, and ultimately the deer collapsed and died. My friend's dad then looked up and saw the glowing cross. The deer had died in the exact spot his friend had died years. I'm not a deer hunter, but a duck hunter from Louisiana. It's a little different, as we typically hunt from a boat or boat platform rather than a stand in the woods. We have had several instances when hunting in a marsh that you hear noises that you can explain, which gets the mind wandering and makes us unsettled. One hunt, I recall parking my boat in a blind that was a few feet off the marsh. After settling down and getting everything ready, we hear a deep grunt a few feet away just after daybreak. Turns out there was an alligator's nest right behind us with about a 10-foot alligator claiming its territory. If you've never heard one grunt, they are very loud. When one that large grunts up close, it'll make your ass bite your underwear a bit when it catches you by surprise. A relative of mine has several deer cam photos of coyotes chasing deer, bobcats chasing rabbits, etc. Easily, the creepiest one was a buck that must have heard the camera and turned to face it. In the antlers, you can clearly see the image of a baby's face. I'm sure it was just a quality issue, but it sure does cause some freaky stuff like that from time to time. I was driving to my hunting group's camp, and along the way I saw a deer on the side of the road. I parked my truck and followed it, trying to get a shot. I only had a bow and arrow, so I had to make sure I had a clear shot. I followed it about 100 yards through the forest off trail before something scared it off and I lost it. I went to where I last saw it and then could see an old white van in a little clearing. At this point, I just wanted to get back to my truck. I knew the general way back, and since it was pretty muddy, I followed my boot prints back. At one point, I saw another pair of prints on top of mine, and that was when I started to get really paranoid. I looked around and saw someone back in the direction of the van with a rifle coming towards me. I started running back as fast as I could, all the while he was chasing me down as well. I got back to my truck and saw a note. I grabbed it and hoped my old 85 Toyota pickup would start on the first try, and luckily it did. The note said, "If I come back again, he will shoot me on sight." I promptly drove home and skipped hunting the rest of that season. Still get scared whenever I even think about driving around that area. Not hunting, but was riding my mountain bike through a heavily grassed wilderness area and noticed something following me on my way back. It was a coyote, I think. I stopped and looked back at it. It stopped and looked at me. I had no weapons, no gun, not even a slingshot. We stared each other down for a bit, and then I kept cycling. It kept following me. I stopped again and stared it down. My instincts told me to make noise, so I shouted and flailed my arms a bit, then kept cycling home. After a while, it suddenly disappeared. I've never cycled home so far in my life. In the woods, hunting a coyote that was eating my neighbor's chickens when I was like 14. It was cloudy, so it was pitch black out, and I had a break-action shotgun with one shot left. I worked my way into a very, very thick patch of underbrush with just a flashlight taped to my gun for illuminating eyes. I stepped on a crunchy stick and suddenly heard a mountain lion scream within 50 feet of me. I carefully backed away from that direction and hoped the fuck out towards home. I could hear it following me all the way to the tree line in my yard, and when I shined the flashlight at it, there were multiple sets of eyes reflecting back. I'm pretty sure it was teaming up with... What's the creepiest or scariest thing that you've seen but no one believes you? My friend and I were driving around our small town one night around 1 a.m. We were just casually talking and listening to the radio low. Well, we both saw someone basically walk into the road right in front of her car. She slammed on the brakes, but the person was just gone, literally like in thin air. We drove around the block and surrounding area like 5 times after to see if we could spot the person again, but there was no one. None of our friends believed us, but we both know what we saw. Before I was a teenager, I used to get really vivid dreams or daydreams. There's a chance some were just very early memories that my mind had distorted, but it's odd. A couple that spring to mind. I had a dream from my sister's perspective that she was checking on me as a baby. It then went to a third-person view, and I was watching her soothe me as a child. I checked with my mother, and I relayed to her which room in the house the crib was, exactly where in that room and what design it was, and betting. It was correct. She was a little spooked by it.
There's no way I could have known other than memory. Peculiarly, there are no photos of me as a baby, which is a standing family joke. Maybe I should worry. Another time, I had a dream about a new girl that had started at my school. I was about 9 years old. Coincidentally, the next day, I was sat next to her at school and told her I correctly described her kitchen, including its unique format, her mother and her pet parrot, not a common pet here. I still wonder what was going on with that one sometimes. Two very similar situations, and both likely because my mind was overactive or bordering on sleep. The first was when, after a full damn day and an argument I had with someone, I was arguing with myself while I did the dishes, naked because the fates have decided I am to feel as vulnerable as humanly possible in this situation. Even though I live in a safe area, it is a habit that doors and windows get locked down. So, I go on my should-have-said-this tangent, my cat judging me, and as I finish loading my plates, I hear my name spoken. It is clear as day and in a deep, bass voice, right in the same room. At first I was horrified. Then I was like Trunchbull from Matilda. Who's in my house? Until I realized that I must have been hearing things. The second was when I was drifting off into sleep, and I heard very clearly the most unisex and characterless voice I have ever heard say, "We're gonna get you." And it sounded like it was just at the foot of my bed. I am a fairly fit man, but my cat kept me company until I fell asleep. I'm in a friend group of guys and girls in our early 30s. We've been friends since high school. Everyone is very friendly and nice. One guy, Charlie, is a truly kind, humble guy, works in graphic design for a non-profit, is super passionate about progressive issues, has a lovely girlfriend who is similar to him. He is like a brother to me. One day last year, I was at Charlie's place. He was taking a shower. I opened up his laptop to make a restaurant reservation, and it opened up to an explicit image of our mutual close friend Alice having sex, and it was in a folder. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started scrolling through the folder's images. It was not just Alice, but every woman in our friend group, as well as images of other women we know having sex, and even an image of Charlie's own female cousin. Scrolling along, I came to the realization that these were not authentic images, but fairly masterfully produced photoshops. There were clues in most pictures to indicate that they were edited, although they looked genuine at first glance. I never mentioned what I saw to Charlie, but told another of our mutual male friends who refused to believe me, insisted I was messing with him, as Charlie would never do that. I have since never tried to tell anyone, but I'm always quite wary around Charlie. I once walked into my living room to see a football that I have never seen before lying in the middle of the room vertically. It fell on one side when I guess it noticed me, and proceeded to roll into the kitchen and behind the counter and out of view. After standing there from awe and confusion, I went to look for it. It wasn't there. Never saw it again. Sorry for the long read. I originally posted this in the paranormal and crawler sighting subreddits, and I thought to post it here as a comment. Okay, so this happened to my boyfriend, 24 male, and I, 27 female, about 2 years ago in the middle of the night. I decided to post it because it haunts me to this very day, and I still have nightmares about it. It was about 2 a.m. one night in September. We live about 25 minutes out of town in northern British Columbia, Canada, and our house is surrounded by the woods. Because it's such a dead road, usually we would pull out of the driveway and then turn on our lights. Why? I don't know, weird habit. We both would do it, LMAO, not anymore, lights on immediately. So I'm driving. I pull out to go left down the road and turn on the high beams. Then we see it. In the road is this weird, hairless, pale humanoid creature crouching in the middle of the road. It almost seemed to be glowing, but that was probably because it was such a pale white and I hadn't turned off my high beams. It whipped its head at us, as if it was surprised by our lights turning on. After a second, it shambles across the rest of the road in jerky movements and down into the ditch, which was about 3 feet deep. But that's not it. We both watched as it went down into the ditch, turned around to face us, and it stood up on its back legs, exactly like a human, but not quite. Except, it stood over 5 feet higher than the ditch, taller than our car at the time, and remember the ditch is already 3 feet deep, so this creature was over 7 feet tall. It looked aggressive, hunched at the shoulders and leaning forward slightly, as if to look at the car, and I swear I made eye contact with it. No, it was not watching us drive by. It wasn't looking at the car. It was looking through the window, and it was looking right at me. Whatever it was intelligent. I knew that the car wasn't moving itself. It knew we were inside. I drove so slowly, turning my head and keeping eye contact with it as we drove past, and it did the same, craning its neck to watch me leave. My boyfriend couldn't see it past me at that point. Eventually, it's out of my vision, and I look back at the road. We were both completely silent. I'm driving less than 10 kilometers an hour, having taken my foot off the gas when I saw something in the road. To this day, I don't really tell people because the people I tell just laugh it off or try to explain it as an albino starving bear or something. It wasn't. It had no snout, long skinny limbs, and a flat, human-like face. Second incident was last year when his parents were visiting just before winter hit. They have a dog. Me and his mom were having a smoke on the deck, which is about 6 feet off the ground. It's dusk. Not much light. We were on the left side of the deck, the same side we turn on the road to go to town. You can see the patch of woods where the creature would have been before, so this instance happened in the same little area. I hear a bunch of cracking twigs, just as the dog goes nuts. He's a small boy, so we were surprised when he almost jumped off the deck to run in the woods. My boyfriend comes out just in time and we see it, just beyond some trees, so it's obscured, a tall, lanky white form. But we couldn't see anything else definitive, and his mom has terrible eyesight and didn't have glasses. I know it was the same creature. I got this twisting feeling in my gut. We don't leave our house at night. Maybe it's weird, but I want to see it again. There's such a huge difference, man. I used to think, wow, these stories are cool, so I believe in them. It was nothing compared to the awed terror I felt when I made eye contact with something I'm positive is not natural. I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood a few streets over. One night, we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out of the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute, and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning, and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5-something in the a.m. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I had just left. He groggily answered and confirmed that I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't tired. No one could have slipped anything into either of the 2 Coors Lights I'd had. No known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. I one time heard an evil laugh, and yes, it sounds fucking stupid, but I can't explain it otherwise. I tried once here on Reddit and people came up with all kinds of alternatives, in a good sense, but I tried listening to those sounds on YouTube and nothing matched. I was out one evening in our front yard, and around here at night, unless there is a party in town or a circus or whatever, there is dead silence. It was in the summer, so even the nights were hot indoors. I got out, stood there for half a minute, then suddenly, without warning, I heard an evil and demonic laugh for about 5 or 6 seconds. Then everything went silent again, and I haven't heard it since. I don't know what it was. It doesn't scare me outright to this day, but it kind of unsettles me. There were no parties in the neighborhood, no people or cars on the street, nothing. It happened about 2 streets from me. I think there's about 4 to 5 houses between me and the place where the evil laughter was heard. I do not smoke weed or take drugs, and I rarely drink, so I was clean and sober. I don't know how else to explain it. I've gone by the area where it happened many times, and nothing seems out of the ordinary when going over there. When I was in junior high school, I had a school trip to a chariot museum. Basically, it just displayed a lot of chariots from the olden times, Japanese kingdoms, so there were chariots for king's coronation, chariots for festivals, chariots for funeral, etc. When we strolled around the museum, we passed through a chariot, and I saw a lady mannequin laid asleep on it. Then I thought, this mannequin sure does look scary, because it looked like a real person sleeping on a chariot. On the bus on the way back, I told my friend about how creepy the mannequin was, and everyone was confused. They didn't see any mannequins or anything inside the chariots throughout the museum trip. They thought I was messing up with them or straight up lying. I was super confused and scared, and it still puzzled me until now. To this day, I can't stand old televisions. So I had this really old television in my bedroom, really old, like 30 years old. A common occurrence was that sometimes the thing would just flick itself on for no reason and display the channel I was last on, or flick itself off for no reason. Happened one day or night. It was a known issue. One night, when I was staying up especially late, the television kept flicking itself on while I was playing games more than usual. Usually, it was like a once-a-week deal, and then it would do it again. Tonight, it happened 3 times in the span of an hour, and the loud noise it makes clicking on was going to wake my parents if I didn't stop it. I walk up to the wall and unplug it. It clicks on again in an hour, startles the hell out of me, and I find the plug is the back of the wall. Whatever. I thought, I'm tired. I probably pulled the wrong plug from the socket. I unplug it from the wall, push the TV far away from the wall it's leaning against to make sure that I pulled the right one, then went right back to games. It clicks on again a while later. Somehow, it got plugged into the same outlet, just barely in its reach from its position. Slept in the living room that night and demanded it be thrown out the next day. I was probably just tired, but goddamn, I don't ever buy electronics old or secondhand anymore. I was in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania with my family, and we did a ghost tour where a tour guide would take us through the streets of Gettysburg and bring us to paranormal hotspots and explain the history of these places and eyewitness accounts, etc. The guide took us to a church. That was where some of the soldiers camped out, and it was also used as a war hospital, so lots of soldiers died and were operated on in there. There was a house next to there, and all the lights were off. I remember standing in front of the church, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a white figure moving extremely fast toward the house, and when I looked, the motion light on the porch was on. Some freaky shit. I remember when this happened. I was 5. I was playing with a ball with my cousins on my mother's supervision, obviously, grandmother's house. House had a rooftop, and on the rooftop there were 2 storage rooms, and they weren't joint, but they were right next to each other and had medium-sized gap, meaning anyone any size could go there. So my cousin accidentally kicks the ball towards the area and just told you about, and I could see the ball, but what I didn't see was someone. So I got closer to pick up the ball, but as I did, I saw a dark figure that was grinning at me, and holy shit, I ran like never before back to my mother to tell her about the scary man, but when she came with me, it was gone, and so was the ball. One of the scariest experiences of my life. I was smoking on my balcony one night. It was something around 3:30 or 4 a.m. when I noticed a drunk guy walking down the street. He looked kinda homeless and barely could walk in a straight line. I watched him a little because I was worried if he's gonna fall and hurt himself or something. But when I put my eyes down for half a second and put them up again, he just disappeared. Just like he never was there. I thought he made a turn somewhere, but considering that he walked in the middle of a pretty long street without any turns or bushes or some other shit where he could hide or by any means get out of my sight, I started to freak out like WTF just happened. He barely fucking walked. I can see pretty far from my 9th floor. There was just no place to go besides go down the street or up the street. Just concrete walls and sidewalks by the both sides of a pretty wide and long road. That's it. No nothing. Nobody. Amplified silence and me, freaking out on my fucking balcony. Apologies for the length, but here goes. Also, I swear this is 100% true and still scares me to this day. When I was 17, maybe 18, I don't know, been almost 10 years, my parents owned about 10 acres out in the country that butted up to a national forest. During the summer, we had a huge problem with armadillos getting into our pool and digging around the irrigation of our house. My father had a simple solution, a 12-gauge SWAT-style shotgun. This shotgun held 8 rounds and had a flashlight mounted on the side as well as having a holder on the side of the gun that held 6 more rounds. Point is, this thing was overkill. Every night in late spring, early summer, my job was to walk around the house at least twice, usually around 9 and 11. So, one night my parents were out and my brother was in the living room watching TV. During my 9 p.m. round, I kept feeling like I was being watched but never saw anything. So during my 11 p.m. walk around, I grabbed a second, larger flashlight that was much bigger. The entire time, I felt like I was being watched. Every hair on my body was on end. Just as I came around the side of the house to head back in, I felt my entire body go ice cold. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears and my hands were shaking. I've hunted hogs in the dark and been stalked by a mountain lion, and nothing came close to the terror I felt. I swung the flashlight toward the tree line of the national forest, about 50 yards, and saw these two burning red eyes staring at me. They were about 4 feet off the ground and spaced way too far apart to be any animal native to where I live. I dropped the larger flashlight and raised the shotgun, firing once. This is usually enough to scare the dead, much less anything alive, as the boom and flash of the gun is thunderous to say the least. But somehow, over the ringing in my ears from the blast, I hear this sound. I call it a growl only because I have nothing else to compare it to, but I felt this growl in my bones. I proceeded to unleash every round I had, 8 rounds of buckshot, and the eyes are still staring at me. I flipped the shotgun over and started to reload, keeping the muzzle pointed at the eyes and slowly walking backwards. The eyes seemed to almost lazily begin moving towards me. I slammed the last round in, and by now the eyes and what I can only describe as a massive shadow are in the open only 30 yards away. I began firing again, not sure what else to do as I kept backing up. I finally reached the door, and after firing the last shot, hurled myself inside and kicked on the floodlights mounted to the back of our house. These lights are huge and make the backyard look like daytime. The eyes vanished as soon as the lights came on, followed only by a low angry growl. I threw on every exterior light in the house as the feeling of being watched slowly faded away. The craziest part, my brother was still watching TV and hadn't heard 14 rounds of buckshot go off just on the other side of the window he was sitting next to. The next morning, after not sleeping at all, I went outside and the flashlight I dropped was crushed like a truck had run over it. There were no other signs anything had happened. A few weeks later, a neighbor had their guard dog, a Great Pyrenees, torn to shreds about half a mile away. After that, nothing. I know this story sounds crazy, and I feel crazy for it, but it happened. That night is burned into my mind, and even sitting here typing this, I get chills. Serious. Travelers of lonely roads, explorers of the great outdoors, workers of creepy jobs and late night shifts. What's your scary story, and why? Was coming out of Death Valley on a cross-country road trip. Nature called and I asked my friend to pull into a gas station. Was a sketchy place and the bathroom was an infectious disease gold mine, so I decided to go back to the car and wait a few more miles. On the way back, I hear someone say, "Nice shirt," to me. I was wearing a band tee, so I assumed it was a fan. Nope, clearly a druggie. He asks for cash and I wave him off, but he follows. I get to my car, let myself in the passenger side and lock the door. Guy had a knife up his sleeve. He tapped the window with it before we sped off. I sometimes think how that could have gone differently if my friend didn't have the door unlocked, or if I was alone, or if the guy was faster to the draw. Shortly after graduating high school, I started working at a fast food place in rural Washington. One night, we had a huge line of customers right up until close, so doing all of our cleaning stuff took later than usual. By the time my coworkers vanished, I was almost done, but it was already almost midnight, so I told them I could stay and lock up. About 5 minutes after they both left, I heard a knock on the back door, and I was about to open it when I remembered something. If it was one of my coworkers, they wouldn't have knocked. They would have seen my car in the parking lot, assumed I was still there, and just walked in. So, this of course made me wonder who would want to be coming in an obviously closed fast food place at this hour. So I asked, "What do you want?" in the manliest voice a 19-year-old me could possibly muster. After that, I hear the sounds of footsteps just taking off. At this point, I gain the courage to look outside, and I see the outline of a man darting down a back street. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of an engine from that direction. I decided to fuck this, and locked up and left as quick as possible. A few days later, someone was arrested for trying, and failing, luckily, to break into my other coworker's house. News seemed to imply that there was evidence he had been stalking her, and, while I never got a clear answer about how true that was, it disturbed me, because I had been covering that same coworker's shift that night. I was working night shift for a few weeks with a coworker who had fallen ill. He apparently had hepatitis A from a blood transfusion that he'd gotten years and years before. He was a Vietnam veteran that survived multiple gunshot wounds. Basically, the job was to watch him in the event that something bad happened. So over the course of a week or two, I watched him slowly die. His stomach ballooned up to look pregnant, and he would nod off over and over. Most of the time, he was slow to respond, so it scared the shit out of me that he had slipped into a coma or died. Thankfully, there at the end, they told him he needed to stay home for liability reasons, and he ended up going to the hospital shortly after. He died a few days after that. It was sad and terrifying to watch him go that way. I worked afternoons at a grocery store in college. Once, when the assistant manager was out for a surgery, I was tasked with closing up the store. We closed at 11, and by the time the head cashier and I closed out the safe, cleaned up, and locked the doors, it was 11:45. Middle of February in northern Michigan, so cold as hell. I helped the cashier clear the snow and ice off her car, and she left. I started clearing the ice off my car, which was an old clunker and took forever to heat up. Our store was located on a main road, but in a small town, so there was no traffic and nobody around. Our store closed like 3 hours after everything else in town. This guy comes walking through the parking lot, making a beeline for me. I'm a young, big guy, so I don't feel threatened. I'm on the passenger side of my car, which has the keys in the ignition warming up, and he walks up on the driver's side. "Hey man, any chance I can get a ride? It's awful cold out." He smiled at me, and a chill went through me. There was nothing strange in his look or the way he spoke, but something in his smile freaked me out. So I decided I don't want this man in my car, and I make up some excuse about needing to pick up a friend and drive them to work. He starts to step around the car with his hand in his coat pocket. I'm not a tough guy. I'm not at all confrontational, but I did not want this guy near me. So I raise my ice brush, which has the long plastic handle up, and take a step back. "I'm not giving you a ride, and I don't know what you're trying to pull, but I'd rethink it, pal. Real tough guy talk, eh?" He looks surprised and laughs, and takes his hand out of his pocket. "No reason to get mad, big man." He turns off and walks off, stopping at the end of the parking lot to watch me. My big ass hurried into my car and took off. 2 weeks later, a woman who worked at the movie theater 2 blocks down was found stabbed to death in her car. So far as I know, they never found who killed her. I have no proof, and it's probably just a coincidence, but I feel like it was that guy I saw. I've never in my life had a visceral reaction like that to a seemingly harmless person. Something wasn't right with him. I inspected vacant houses for banks, had to document and photo every room, boiler, gas and electric meter. Vacants that sit empty for long stretches get inspected every month. One house I'd been to every month for 2 years had an attic that just didn't feel right. No items up there, just an empty attic with no light source. I would take the photo in the dark, illuminated by only my flashlight. Nothing weird happened for the entire time, but I always took the photo and got out of there as fast as I could, like when you would turn the lights off in the basement as a kid and run up the stairs. I did this job for years. Been in dark basements, alone, in silence, multiple times a day for years. Last time I did that house, I checked the meter like I always do. Dead. Cobwebs on the dial. I photoed the house like I always do. Climbed the stairs to the attic. I reach the top and the door is open. Odd. I get to a point in the stairs where I'm not all the way there, but I can see level with the floor. All of a sudden, a light goes on. There's a light bulb hanging from the center that was never there, and it just turned on as I reached the top. Across from the open door was a mirror facing directly toward the stairs. I saw myself in the mirror for just enough time to see how startled I was. Then the light turned off. I have never ran that fast out of a house before or since. Every month after that, I faked the inspection with old photos, Photoshop the date stamp, still get goosebumps thinking about it. Used to work at a movie theater. For closing, there was usually just one person working the concessions and a shift manager, or the actual manager. Cleaning up could be creepy because the concessionist would usually have to clean alone. One night, I was cleaning a theater that had the front few lights out, so you couldn't clearly see one corner. There was someone in the corner. I wouldn't normally mind because some people like to watch the entire credits. They got up and started walking toward the screen, which I thought was odd. The shift manager turned off the music, which was pretty jarring. I turned to see if she was in the booth, and she wasn't. I turned back around and the person was gone. I left the theater because I was still pretty creeped out. The shift manager came over. I told her about what happened. We grabbed some heavy wooden brooms and went to look behind the screen. Nobody there. The only other exit was the emergency exit, and they couldn't have left from there or the emergency warning would have gone off. We stuck together the rest of the night. A year or so later, we found out there was actually a tunnel-type thing that connected 3 of the 4 theaters. The entrance to the tunnel was behind each of the screens. Don't like to think about who that was or how they might have known about the tunnel. When me and my sister were teenagers, we were on a road trip with our parents in the mountains of British Columbia, Canada. It was the middle of the night, and we pulled over to a rest stop for a break. It was pitch black, no towns anywhere nearby, just trees and mountains. My mom was driving and had reclined her seat for a nap and then decided to get out of the car for a minute, probably to stretch. She jumped back in the car and said she heard someone. I remember my dad kind of laughing because we were in the middle of nowhere. She turned on the headlights and there was a man standing right in front of the car. Seat still reclined. She started the car and drove off so fast. It was terrifying. No idea why he was there, but we didn't stick around to find out. I was hiking in the woods of North Georgia, and I ran into a massive black bear on the trail. He ran off, but I saw him 15 minutes later. He runs off. I see him again, he runs off. I sit down to eat, bear comes back. I throw rocks and he runs off. I keep moving down the trail, run into a hiker coming the other way. He tells me bears are up ahead and wants to camp with me. I tell him bears are behind me and I want to camp with him. In the morning, I hike up the trail for 10 minutes and see 2 bears. Keep hiking, see another bear. Bears everywhere. I work as a paramedic and went to a mental health call in an apartment block. Police were also on scene with us as it was a very rough area with lots of assaults. We were assessing her, and halfway through the assessment, she went out on the apartment balcony to have a cigarette, and we could hear her talking to her male neighbor on a separate balcony next to hers. She finished her cigarette and came down to the ambulance with us. She was talking to herself a bit and then started responding to herself in the same male voice we could hear when she was out on the balcony. It was utterly convincing. I work in the construction industry, and I've seen a lot of things, but one story that still keeps me up at night. I was on a job where they were remodeling this old hospital campus. It was a huge complex that had been abandoned since the early 1970s. It was so big that it had sustained an impressive animal population for some time. It was common to see deer, foxes, and skunks running around. One day, I was walking back to my car and I saw a deer with half an antler run into a building that we hadn't remodeled yet. The next day, I was walking to another part of the job site with a piece of paper I need to document for auditing reasons. It flew out of my hand and into an open window of the same building I saw the deer run into the day before. I peeked into the window and saw the paper lie on the floor. I did a quick once-over of the room for safety, climbed through the window and into the room. Once I retrieved the paper, I smelled a weird smell coming from the adjacent room. I took a quick peek and saw the mangled carcass of the deer with half an antler I saw the day before. At the exact same moment, I hear the sound of something large and heavy coming up the stairs. It was also groaning and puffing. Needless to say, I noped out of there and practically jumped out the window. I grabbed my stuff and ran to the job site. I told the head project manager about the ordeal, and he relayed it to animal control. I wasn't there for that much longer, literally a day, but I heard they closed down the site for a couple of days. I also heard that they did find something, and it was some kind of big cat not native to the area. To this day, I think about how I was almost cat food. My creepiest experience happened when I was 20 and ended up teaching me a good lesson. I was driving alone on 95 in the deep south at 1 a.m. when I almost ran out of gas. I took the next exit for a station. The station ended up being 15 or so minutes from the highway. The station had 0 lights, completely in the middle of the woods, and the only person around was the employee. As I was pumping gas, a pickup truck full of some really rough-looking guys piled in the back, swearing, drunk, going nuts. It was a scene straight out of Deliverance. I kept my head down and was praying I wouldn't end up being kidnapped. All of a sudden, one of the guys shouted, "Boys, look who it is next to us." All heads turned to me. The biggest guy then said, "There's a lady present, guys," then proceeded to profusely apologize for cursing in my presence. The rest did the same. Lesson learned. Don't judge a book by its cover. Probably the politest guys I have encountered to this day. I'm a young woman and I love to travel alone, though I rarely do because of how dangerous it is. One day, when I was living in Paris, I decided I needed to get out of the city and took a train to a nearby giant park or small forest and was really enjoying myself just walking around listening to music. I stayed on some bigger trails with lots of people. Then this one man walked past me and looked me up and down and gave me the creepiest look I've ever seen. I kept walking and looked behind me in time to see him do a complete 180 and start following me. I got a little freaked out and started walking faster and suddenly realized the trail was pretty empty. I turned down a different path, partly to see if he was following me, partly to find more people. He turned down the path after me. I got really freaked out and picked up my pace. So did he. The path suddenly turned a corner and I was able to duck behind a tree. The man kept going down the path and I hid behind the tree for a while. He then came back the path, obviously looking for me. I was able to run away and find a nice old French couple to walk with me back to the train station. I know this doesn't seem huge, but to a young woman traveling and living alone, I hate to imagine what could have happened if that man had gotten me. A few years ago, I was hiking in a national park. They told us that there were moose, very territorial moose. Avoid the moose if you can. Well, I had woken up around 4 a.m. in this campsite we were staying at. I really had to go to the bathroom. I'd been having some stomach issues, so it wasn't something I could put off. So I grabbed my headlamp, prayed I'd find my way back from the outhouse to our campsite, and headed out. The way there was uneventful but nerve-wracking. It's dark as hell, the grass is tall, we're next to a shoreline. I finish my business and leave the outhouse. My way back to the campsite has me go parallel to the shoreline. As I'm walking, I hear the water moving in time with me. At first, I think it's just waves. Then it becomes clear it's something large stepping through the water in time with me. I turned to look, and I saw the dim light of my headlamp reflect the eyes of something bigger and taller than me. Something in my head told me not to run, that I didn't want to freak it out and have a pissed off animal chasing after me. So I just speed walked back to the camp and got in my bag and barricaded the shelter door. Apparently, people in the wee hours of the morning see a large bull moose hanging out right where I had been walking. It chilled for a bit and went on its merry way. Absolutely scary in the dark though. I work in a facility for the mentally disabled. Sometimes I work night shifts and the place is over 100 years old. So many people have lived and died here. I worked with a woman that had a bunch of machines attached to her and I just had to sit with her overnight. There was a round mirror on the wall, those ones you see in stores so you can look if someone is coming around the corner, and thought I saw myself sitting in the chair. After a while, I noticed something was off and waved my arm. I saw my arm on the other side of the mirror from where I thought I was. I stared at this person that was in another room. The rooms are just sectioned off parts of a large room for what seemed like hours. I wanted to go check, but I had to stay with the woman. When the nurse came to check vitals, I went to look and there was nothing. When I sat back down, I noticed it was gone. The only exit or entrance to the room was right under the mirror. I moved my chair to the other side and watched the room's entrance the rest of the night, waiting for someone to come out. I felt like someone was watching us the rest of the night. Back in the 90s, I was a test driver for one of the big three at a prototype test facility. We tested their prototype cars and trucks for durability, new technology, etc. I worked the graveyard shift because it paid more. Some tests were on grounds and some tests were highway miles. One route required going way out in the desert, was in Arizona, to an abandoned gold mining town from the early 1900s. It was in the middle of the mountains, was on a very treacherous narrow road, think narrow lanes, drop off cliffs with no guardrails, and extremely tricky switchbacks. Lots of the graveyard drivers, including myself, saw and heard lots of weird shit out of there at night. Rumor was mostly UFO type stuff, weird lights, etc. Well, one night I was heading back to grounds and I came up on top of the pass and was heading into 8 miles of 15-mile-per-hour max switchbacks and drop-off cliffs. It was extremely dangerous to be on this road if you were sleepy. I pulled over to step out and get some fresh air and to make sure I was alert. It was about 3 a.m. Got back in the truck and started into the switchbacks. And that's the last thing I remember. until 8 miles later when I snapped to and realized I was at Cool Springs, which was the end of the switchbacks. I had absolutely zero memory of driving for the last 20 to 25 minutes. I was so freaked out about how I could have possibly driven that without driving off a cliff that I was shaking so bad I had to pull over until I calmed down. I don't think I fell asleep. There's no way I could have driven that road asleep. More than one person has run off the cliffs there and died. But to this day, I have no memory of that run. One day, while I was hiking in the Black Forest, Germany, I was on my way back to the house I was staying after I misjudged the time and had to walk the last kilometers in the dark. Let's say the Black Forest has its name for a reason. Even at the day, it can be hard to see, but after the sun went down, you can't see shit. So I was trying to follow the road and not accidentally run off a cliff when I suddenly get the feeling of being watched. As I said, I can't see shit, and it's also in the middle of the forest, behind the last mountain, so there can't really be anyone there. Anyway, I continue walking while keeping an eye out for anything suspicious, or at least trying. This continues until the road makes a sharp turn, and after going the new direction for a few meters, I notice a very strong smell. I smoke, and my sense of smell isn't great, but it still hit me pretty strong. I guessed that it had to be a boar with her younglings, so I get even more nervous. But I had a few encounters with some before, so wasn't too concerned. But I still have the feeling that someone of the smell and the silence was off. Boars are loud, so normally you can hear them way before you smell them. Anyway, I continued and reached the house. Didn't think too much of it until the next morning. I hear at the radio that in exactly that area I was going through, an unusually aggressive wolf was seen by multiple people.
What is the craziest paranormal experience you've had?
We were visiting my in-laws around Christmas, and we were chatting in their den, having some drinks and catching up. They had a Christmas tree in the corner of the den. Nobody was sitting near it. My husband and father-in-law were sitting in lounge chairs, and I was sitting with my mother-in-law on the couch on the opposite side of the tree. The two dogs were napping between us. We were all at least 6 feet away from the tree. All of a sudden, their Christmas tree begins to violently shake, like someone grabbed the trunk and was shaking the dust off of it. A few ornaments fell to the ground, and then it stopped. It shook for a good 10 seconds. The thing is, we were the only 4 in the house. The dogs were sleeping on the couch with us. The tree had been up for at least a week, so no woodland creatures hiding in it, and nothing else in the house shook. No glass clinking, no other rumbling sounds, just the tree. We checked the news to see if there was an earthquake. We checked online, pre-smartphones, and the newspapers, and no reports of an earthquake. We also live in an area where earthquakes are rare, so I have no clue what shook the damn tree. We all saw it. The dogs slept through it. They did not give a F. High school girlfriend says she saw an old man in her house in the study. I laughed it off because her house was no older than 20 years old, and how could it be haunted? I jokingly said she saw a wooden carving her parents had that resembled Jesus, because she described the man of having a big white beard. A few weeks later, I was walking from the stairs and into the kitchen where she was sitting. Out of the corner of my eye, I see an older man sitting at the head of the table in the dining room. I tell her that I have to rule out my claim, as the seed of belief may have been planted in my head. Months later, her friend from Brazil was visiting. My girlfriend and I were fooling around upstairs, and her friend burst through the door crying. In Portuguese, my girlfriend asks what's wrong, and her friend says she was listening to music with headphones walking around on the main floor when she ran into an old man with a white beard in the study. There was absolutely no way my girlfriend told her friend, as she wasn't a believer in the paranormal and didn't make a big deal about it when she told me. To this day, it is the one case in my life where I have to truly believe we all saw something in that house. This sounds crazy, but it is 100% true, at least my narrative. I used to live in a mobile home trailer park growing up. There was a hallway that went from one end of the trailer to the other, with the bedrooms coming off of it on one side. My bed was on the wall opposite the hallway, so I could see into the hallway but not down either side. When I was about maybe 6 to 8 years old, if I stayed awake after my dad went to sleep and started at the doorway, I would start to be able to make out a hand stretching from beyond the doorway in the hall, from the right side of the door to the left. The longer I looked, the more of the hand would appear, until eventually, over the course of a few minutes, I could see a red and white striped shirt, sweater sleeve. If I continued to stare, after a longer period, the body of a boy would appear in the doorway. I specifically remember hiding under the covers most nights when this would happen, mostly at the first sight of him. I was never antagonized further than him slowly moving, facing my bed, from the right side of the door to the left, and if I continued to stare, he would eventually disappear beyond the left threshold. We moved out of that trailer into a home when I had just turned 9, and that was the end of it. I never really thought about it, and I never told my dad or anyone else about it, because by the time I had already chalked it up to just seeing things and had thought it was my imagination, I'm sure it probably was. About 15 to 20 years later, my dad and I were talking about his best friend that had lived next door, but sadly just passed away. We started talking about our trailer and the older lady that had moved in after us. My dad said something like, "Funny enough, Dad's friend told me a few years ago that the woman used to see a little boy in a red and white shirt, like a ghost or something." I was obviously taken aback and told him about what I had seen almost every night for a few years, and we were both just a bit shocked at what that might mean. Never experienced anything else, but that completely stumps me. Was home alone with my old roommate's pit bull, Hamburger. She was very sweet, but would bark at strange noises or if she heard something outside the house. Sometimes a light growl and a few barks if she saw a mouse, rare occurrence, but hey, it was an old house. Anyway, it was like 1:30 p.m. and I was chilling in my room and she started barking. Normally a quick, "Hey, cut it out," would hush her up, but not this time. So I figured something had riled her up for real. Went out into the hall and she was looking from the living room down the hall in my direction but past me. So I looked where she was looking and couldn't see anything. Hall was mostly dark except the light from my room, halfway down the hall. Looked back at her and she whimpered for a second. Then out of nowhere, she started growling and barking like I'd never heard before and ran toward me. I was not afraid of her at all and knew she'd never hurt me, but I recoiled a bit until she went a couple of feet past me and continued barking aggressively at the end of the hall. She was not an aggressive dog at all, so this freaked me out, and it was definitely not a mouse because she was looking around human head height. I went to the living room, turned on all the lights, and sat on the couch because it was nice and far from the end of the hall. Called her back to me, and she sat by my side doing a low growl for the next 5 minutes. When I calmed down and wasn't feeling so alarmed anymore, she refused to come with me to my room. Later that night, woke up to what I swear looked like an adolescent girl in a white dress at the foot of my bed. Here's the catch though. My room at night in that house could get really dark. I shouldn't have been able to see anything as distinctly as that. Only reason I doubt what I saw is because I've suffered my entire life from what I can only refer to as night terrors. It's like sleep paralysis, but only the hallucination part. I'm fully capable of moving, and I'm only half asleep, so I end up doing shit like turning all the lights on and throwing pillows at shit that isn't there. That being the case, I was completely conscious when all that with Hammy went down, and normally, when I wake up to a hallucination, it's something like a giant spider or a snake in my bed. Rarely is it a hallucinated person, and I'm almost always terrified no matter what I'm seeing. That night, I wasn't afraid at all when I woke up, and it was gone by the time I turned the light on. Never told any of my roommates, and I've never told one other person before. Even writing it out, I'm doubting myself. All I know is that I love the hell out of that dog, and if there was something there, she put herself between me and it. A buddy and I saw, as clear as possibly could be, a white orb appear out of the air, slowly float up through the trees and disappear. I can explain the entire thing in detail if anyone is interested. I'm not a superstitious or religious person, but I've never heard a good scientific explanation. Ball lightning might be the best possible explanation. Cross-posted answer from another sub asking a similar question. Might as well add mine to the bunch. I actually have 2 standouts, but I'll just start with one. I always had the terrible nightmares as a child, so I'm sure there were plenty of episodes, but this one happened in my mid-20s and was terrifying. I was house-sitting for my parents at my childhood home, no big deal. They have a couple little whiny dogs that refuse to settle down and sleep without my dad since they slept with him every night. By about night 3, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to sleep in my dad's room on the bed with them. I was sleeping on the couch prior to this, and in all the years I've lived there, never slept in that room. In fact, I specifically picked the other bedroom as a child, even though it was visibly bigger and had a beautiful lake view. My parents said I refused to take it. About 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up to that low guttural growl dogs have that instantly makes your hair stand up. Keep in mind, these are little yappy dogs that bark constantly, but this was something entirely different. The room was cold as fuck. This is mid-July in the tropics, so like 95 outside. And even though I'd been dead asleep, I just knew something was wrong. Bad wrong. Both dogs are growling nonstop, so I roll over and halfway open my eyes and see these 2 little kids in what looks like vintage baseball uniforms. I'm talking like turn-of-the-century Victorian age type shit. There was nothing inherently scary about how they appeared, but the feeling of dread was almost indescribable. They're just looking at me, but somehow I knew that whatever these were, they were evil for lack of a better word. I honestly don't even know how to explain it, but I just knew that something was very, very wrong with whatever I was seeing. The absolutely primal terror feeling told me this was not the harmless dream variety. I couldn't stop looking though. I swear I blinked 100 times trying to convince myself it was just a strange night terror, until one half smiled at me. It was just a smile, but at the same time, it was like malicious and somehow just off. I just got this overwhelming urge that told me stop looking, close my eyes, pray hard, and do it now. You have to understand, I'm very much not the religious or church type, and I just squeezed my eyes shut and prayed out loud like I never had in my life for what felt like forever. It finally passed, and about an hour later the dogs calmed down. As soon as I felt like it was safe to get out of that room, I called my parents and made them cut their vacation short and come home that day. My brother sleeps in there every night still with no problem, but something is wrong with that room. I'm not a big fan of the whole evil tropes, but I honestly don't have a better word for it. Whatever was there that night was evil. A couple months ago, I was exiting a Home Depot parking lot and saw a big truck coming in. I immediately knew what was going to happen and said out loud, "Driver has a blue hat and will honk the truck's horn twice while turning," as a way to actually believe myself if it did happen. Well, guess what? I couldn't see the driver until the truck cleared the entrance, but when he did, I saw that he had a blue hat and did honk the horn twice as he was turning right beside me. Felt like an idiot for the whole day for saying out loud what I thought it was going to happen, but felt weirder when it did really happen. I'm driving around with a friend at night. We're both fairly newish to town. We're trying to find a particular place. I took the wrong bridge, so I do a U-turn at the end of the bridge and go back the way I came. But I wasn't going back the way I came. I was still driving in the same direction as before. I panicked and did another U-turn. I'm driving in shock. I eventually look over at my friend to see if she's noticed anything. She seemed unfazed, staring at her phone. I spoke up. "Did you notice that?" "Noticed what?" "When I first U-turned, I wasn't facing the right way." "What?" She looked puzzled. I dismissed the conversation after that. I never brought it up to her again. I'm still to this day so confused. I wasn't drunk or anything. It was like real life lagged or something. I don't know if it's related, but if I kept going that way the bridge went, it would have been miles of woods with an Air Force base in the middle. Horses are weird. I grew up on a horse farm with a large indoor riding area. If there was an accident, like a horse breaking its leg, we would lay a tarp in the arena, bring the horse in if ambulatory, and wait for the vet to give their shot. Off to the glue factory, my dad would say. Roughly 500 meters past multiple walls are where the rest of the horses stay indoors. Anytime there's a horse who's sick or dying, they often whine and kick stalls. One time, a boarder's horse got the shot, and out of nowhere, the entire barn just started screaming. Multiple horses bellowing and scraping the stall doors with their hooves. It sounded like an equine massacre. Some were so upset they broke into sweats and were just huffing away. it was cold, so when I opened the barn door to go to the back of the house, all the steam and condensation from the horse breath and sweat left the barn at once. Again, these horses had zero chance to see and could likely barely hear what was happening. And the neighing went off like an explosion. Super creepy. I'll go ahead and leave my story here as well. The house I grew up in, which my parents still own, was always very creepy. One night, I was standing in my room and I looked next to me. There was a little girl wearing a white nightgown and she had blonde hair. My mom had a daycare, so I was always used to daycare kids. However, it was 11 p.m. and she was not a daycare kid. For some reason or another, I said, "Go back to your playroom." Then I realized what was happening and looked back, and she was gone with the door slowly shutting itself. I've also had many sleep paralysis instances where I could open my eyes and see the floor next to my bed and see the legs and shoes standing there without being able to move. I told this story to a girl who lived next to me at a campfire one night, and before I explained the girl, she came out and said, "Was she blonde with a white nightgown?" She told me that she had also seen her at her house one night. My old house was a pretty large run-down looking house. The floorboards creaked and everything, and it kind of looked somewhat like a haunted house, but that's what my friends would say. But anyways, it was pretty late at night, and I went downstairs to grab water, right? I heard some sort of breathing, so I turned around and legit saw nothing. I followed where the breathing was coming from, and it was from inside a fucking cupboard, which scared the life out of me. I opened the cupboard, and I kid you not, I saw this thing crouching there, so I closed the cupboard and ran like anybody else would. The next morning, there was like no shit or nothing there. It was empty. So, yeah, that's that. LOL. I never really believed in ghosts. At this point, it feels like a dream, and I don't fucking know, dude. It was scary as shit. I'll provide you with different stories. Story number 1. I was sleeping in my grandpa's old room. He recently passed away, and his body, in our tradition, was outside in the hallway. The hallway did not have a door and literally was outside. Well, the fabulous fam decided to move his body closer to my window. The whole night I could hear footsteps. I then saw a shadow of a man with a hat walking back and forth. I'm a light sleeper, so I said all angry, "Shut up, let me sleep. Go to sleep or leave." LOL, the person left. Well, I found out my cousin thought she saw my grandpa walking around in the hallway, but she didn't understand as he was dead. So I guess we both saw my grandpa's spirit. I don't know. Story number 2. My cousin used to stay up late studying, but would always go to sleep at 1 or 2 a.m., never any later. In Mexico, we have our showers and bathrooms outside of our house. So she had a habit before going to sleep to take a shower. Well, before she stepped out, she saw this lady in all black walking towards my grandma's room. She thought it was my grandma and followed, without saying anything because my grandma is slightly deaf, so no point in calling her. She went inside. Nothing. She then heard in the kitchen stuff moving. She goes in. Nothing but the door on the opposite side open. She goes in to close the door, then walks back to the original door and closes it as well. But before she did, she saw from the corner of her eye the same lady but standing inside. At that moment, my grandma comes out of her room, pulls my cousin inside, and tells her she got lucky, the lady didn't get her. My cousin was confused and didn't go to sleep or take her shower. She stayed in my grandma's room. Well, later on, my aunt opened the kitchen, and on all the windows there were finger marks from inside, like someone was stuck trying to get out. It's not crazy, but I think it's the only one I've had, so... It was morning, and I was laying in bed still. My eyes were closed, but I was very much awake, just didn't want to get up yet, you know? I then heard a female voice say, "Oh, there she is." Brief pause, then a quiet gasp. That made my eyes open quite quickly, and I looked to my door to see if my mom had come into my room or something, but no one was in the basement. It was a very clear voice coming from across my room. I'm not sure what happened, but it was either an angel or something, or I was imagining things. The voice also gasped immediately after I had focused on it and was about to open my eyes, so I suppose they hadn't meant for me to hear them. Me and some friends were counselors at a music camp in Northern California, and we always stayed in the super old dorm that was a hospital at one point. My friend Nate was into those ghost hunting shows, and we used to do this thing in the dorm late at night called an EVP session. Basically, you do an AMA with spirits and try to get them to answer questions while recording it, hoping you pick up some paranormal audio. We never took it seriously. It was mostly something we did for fun after a few drinks. Well, one night, we start doing the session and we start hearing some of the bumps and sounds in relation to the question we asked. We are all still kind of joking around, going, yeah, right, but we can feel the room getting a little quieter. Then one of us asks, "What is your name?" A few moments go by and we hear Nate ask, "That was a joke, right?" He had his headphones hooked into his recorder, and we sat watching him puzzled because he had this look on his face. He heard something we didn't. After some discussion, we play back the audio through the speakers and on the recorder so everyone can hear. "What is your name?" we hear our friend ask. We hear in a whisper, but clear as a bell, something we didn't hear before. "I'm Timothy." One of my friend's girlfriends growing up had a really cool house. She lived basically in a mother-in-law's suite with her parents in high school, so it was nice to hang there because we could be as loud as we wanted. One night I went upstairs pretty late to go grab a snack and saw her mom at the top of the stairs to their room. I apologized and felt really bad because I didn't mean to wake her mom up. I went back downstairs and told my friend I hoped her mom doesn't yell at her, and she was very frank in the fact that her parents were out of town and that I must have seen a ghost. I guess there's a ghost at the house who looks exactly like her mother, and they even have old records and photos of the families who lived there forever ago, and the resemblance is uncanny. I had a dream that I was at this cottage party, though I didn't recognize anyone there, but I knew them. All of a sudden, someone is knocking on the door and about 20 people crowd around it. I'm walking up and everyone turns to look at me saying, "They're here for you." I'm like, fuck this, no thank you, but I still go and walk up. It's this old lady kind of lying on the ground as if she crawled up there. She's got stringy long legs and white eyes. I'm like, "No thank you, good day, ma'am," but I somehow feel comforted. I leave her at the door and walk to my room at the cottage, and there's this old man sitting in my bed. I'm like, "Okay, hey." He's like, "Someone died recently in your life and you didn't get to say goodbye. Now is your chance." I look out the window and he's also there. I again feel comforted. Then my friend's dog woke me up. I definitely know this was about my friend who had passed away a month before. She had stage 4 stomach cancer and died within a month of knowing. It's crazy what our subconscious can do.